Now we go back to see how this crazy story began. He was an ordinary streamer, sitting at the computer for days and slowly erasing the line between night and day. That was until a game called Tower of Trials appeared in his life. Nerds from all over the world rushed into it, storming levels and breaking each other for rare rewards. They skipped meals, fell asleep at the keyboard, and returned to the game immediately after waking up. Time passed and the delight was replaced by the heavy realization that the tower was impossible to pass. Each new opponent proved stronger than the previous one, and their attempts resembled slamming their foreheads into concrete. Players were thrown into icy cold, endless labyrinths, and battles with creatures that looked more like gods. What started as fun turned into grueling torture. Cheerful streams gave way to silence. Chats emptied and the project began to die. Only a few remained in the game. Stubborn old men who decided to go to the end no matter what. Among them was a guy named Alex. He had long since stopped reading comments and didn't care about other people's opinions, focusing only on winning. Alex played differently from everyone else, breaking the usual routes and remembering every detail. For 11 years, he climbed up step by step until he finally reached the top floor. The screen flashed. The system congratulated him and informed him of an upcoming major update. 1 second he was the winner, and the next moment he returned to cold reality. Outside the game, Alex was greeted by an empty apartment, silence, and a lack of any plans for tomorrow. His world was limited to his computer and virtual subscribers, as lost as he was. Once considered a promising athlete, he now looked at himself on screen as a stranger. To somehow celebrate the victory, Alex launched a live broadcast. The camera was recording, the chat was living its own life, and inside him a feeling of emptiness was growing. He closed the broadcast, collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep for a while. When Alex woke up and saw the news, he initially thought it was a continuation of the nightmare. But the longer he looked at the screen, the more clearly he realized that the test tower had appeared in the real world. All over the globe, people turned on cameras and filmed what was happening with trembling hands. Towers have sprung up in every country, without explanation, instructions, or warnings. The governments remained silent, and what was happening looked like a mocking experiment. The system announced that the update phase was complete and players had 90 days to complete it. Passed within this time, humanity will be destroyed. It was hard to believe such words, but the reality around left no doubt. People were rushing around screaming and wondering why they had been punished like this. Alex froze for a moment, staring at the screen, and then his lips slowly pressed together. He remembered his empty apartment, the lack of money, and tomorrow. Now, instead of slowly rotting away, he has a chance to change everything. Alex knew the tower better than anyone on the planet, and that knowledge suddenly became a weapon. He was not distinguished by strength, speed, or exceptional intelligence. But behind him was experience, gained through years of mistakes and deaths. While the others were drowning in panic, Alex acted without further ado. He jumped out of the house and ran towards the central metro. Players were already crowding there, and the place quickly turned into an impromptu event district. On the way, the loser disappeared, giving way to a collected man with a heavy look. One glance was enough to understand that those who had completed the first part of the tower had gathered here. Only they knew where to move next. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the crowd, sending goosebumps down my spine. That annoying skunk is back again. His well-groomed appearance poorly concealed his rotten nature. A famous streamer named John drowned many of his colleagues in his time. Now he smiled as if the past had never existed and extended his hand in friendship. John understood perfectly well who was in front of him and saw Alex as the key to survival. But Alex's memory worked perfectly, and he had no intention of joining forces with this man. Many streamers partnered with large companies simply because they had no other sources of income. Hellish working conditions sooner or later broke most of the truly talented players. They were constantly underpaid and, over time, were forced to leave the profession forever. Many of Alex's friends nearly starved to death after signing extremely unfavorable contracts with a VR company. John was the general manager of this company, and behind his smile there was always a cold and calculating mind. Now the world had changed, and they were no longer on the same side. Alex quickly made this clear with his hard and precise strike. The instant knocked-out teeth immediately brought John back to harsh reality. He had to adapt to the new rules as quickly as possible, otherwise an inglorious death awaited him. Ignoring the slug, Alex calmly walked forward. Ahead, near the fountain, a mandrake tree was already waiting for him. It was at that moment that he finally realized that what was happening was not a dream. Pinching his arm, he felt a sharp pain and a surge of confidence. The tree bore deliciously ripening fruits, which gave off the scent of peaches. These fruits directly increased the characteristics of newcomers. The bad news was that there were only 4 fruits and the competition was too stiff. The players immediately rushed to the tree, as if someone had hung dollar bills there and promised free Wi-Fi. The hungry pigs fought among themselves and very quickly lost their human appearance. John did not give up trying to unite with Alex and offered him a lot of money. He knew that he would not survive without an experienced mentor, and he was shaking with fear and anger. For Alex, it was truly the perfect moment for revenge. Ordinary people didn't even suspect the existence of a tree with such fruits. Players who had played only a few times were completely focused on the fight for the fruit, and only the most experienced fighters knew the real truth about this level. Alex openly watched the bloody spectacle, knowing full well what the mandrake was capable of. At some point, the tree twitched, as if it had come to life, and began killing players indiscriminately. The frightened people ran away in panic, finally giving up on the sweet fruits. John also wanted to give up, and Alex immediately allowed himself a short taunt. He said that the real reward of the event can only be obtained when all the fruits are eaten. With these words, he managed to hook John, and he decided to stay. Now it was necessary to get closer to the tree, acting without naivety and stupid mistakes. It was necessary to approach the tree from 2 sides in order to distract the monster's attention. John was intrigued by the idea and decided to take the risk. He looked into Alex's cold eyes, and another thought immediately came to his mind. After his teeth were knocked out, he thought only about revenge. Instead of running straight towards the tree, John chose a waiting technique. He wanted Alex to become bait and distract the monster's attention. In fact, this is exactly what the experienced player was trying to achieve. Alex deliberately manipulated his opponent, preparing him to become food for the monster. Wooden chains suddenly grabbed John by the legs and pulled him down. He tried with all his might to hold on, but by that time his fate had already been decided. Miserable and frightened, he began to ask for help. For the first time in his life, Alex probably allowed himself to be a ruthless egoist. He watched calmly as his revenge became reality. The man who ruined many lives finally answered for his sins. The wooden chains tightened, turning on the anaconda mode, and broke all his bones. Having gotten rid of the excess ballast, Alex focused entirely on the main goal. Now he had to act flexibly to avoid repeating John's fate. He remembered every movement of this tree perfectly. A good memory and experience helped him evade all attacks and reach the main prize. The mandrake core appeared just a few meters away from the player, right before his eyes. Reality behaved exactly like a game, and all that was left was to follow the long-learned scenario. In an attempt to stop the intruder, the mandrake activated the feeding vessel technique. Deadly wooden spears rushed forward, trying to tear the guy apart. Alex took cover, waited out the attack, and sharply closed the distance. A series of precise defensive movements showed that he knew this fight by heart. Even a few drops of blood didn't wipe the slight grin from his face. He had been through this mission too many times for anything to go wrong now. In a panic, the tree released a swarm of butterflies, showering everything around with soporific pollen. Alex instantly closed his nose and held his breath. After this, the resistance weakened, and all that was left was to reach the core. Calculated and confident, Alex moved as if his whole life depended on this step. The system immediately congratulated him on his victory over the mandrake. The characteristics have increased noticeably, and the next level is already very close. Besides the mandrake core, another valuable artifact was hidden inside the tree. The monster's heart allowed for an additional boost to 12 characteristics at once. When Alex activated the reward, his body burst into light and rose above the ground. Now, he was officially the strongest Tier 1 player, and that was just the beginning. In the new reality, streaming remained an important part of the game. Successful players continued to film themselves and post videos on social media. Alex did the same, and the chat instantly exploded with messages. People didn't understand where the guy who knew everything in advance came from. He was called Divine Providence, and a genius descended from heaven. There were also those who immediately offered money for tuition. Just yesterday, he was barely making ends meet, but today, he could become the richest player in the world. Proposals poured in from all countries and continents. After years of poverty and constant problems with paying rent, it seemed like a fairy tale. The years of fast food and ruined health suddenly seemed like a distant past. Previously, only the endless game of tower defense distracted Alex from the dullness and poverty. Now it looked like an opportunity that simply couldn't be missed. While Alex was busy playing, mana leaking from the trial tower flooded the districts of Seoul. This meant that ancient relics began to acquire magical properties. More experienced players immediately realized the opportunity and rushed to strengthen. To avoid missing the opportunity for progress, it was necessary to urgently run to the local museum. It was there that relics from all eras were kept, ready to receive a second wind. Competition was inevitable, and the battle for the prize promised to be fierce. Slowing his pace a little, Alex carefully opened the museum door. One glance was enough to understand that he was late. Inside, there was thick smoke and a foul smell of burnt meat. What exactly happened here was unclear, but someone was definitely unlucky. The difference between expectations and reality turned out to be much sharper than he thought. In just one day, many became fearless and lost their human appearance. For a reward like the Tidu card, players were willing to tear each other apart. An ancient map, imbued with mana, held the data on the Tower of Trials, and everyone wanted to get their hands on it. It indicated where to look for the runic labyrinth and which items were valued most highly. This card allowed you to reach the 10th floor faster than the others. This was more than enough to turn people into participants in a bloodbath. Something similar was happening on the second floor of the museum right now. Suddenly, a guy came out of the crowd shouting louder than anyone else. He ordered everyone to shut up and freeze in place. He stared at the crowd without blinking, as if choosing his next target rather than a threat. The other players looked at each other and decided to check what he was really capable of. He was once nicknamed Stone Fists during his boxing days at university. Now this talent has become even more pronounced, and no one is in a hurry to get involved with it. One aggressive reaction was enough to discourage the others from moving forward. The players took a step back, lowered their eyes, and tried to stay out of his way. Suddenly, some old fart decided to disobey the order. He calmly walked up to the huge bodybuilder and challenged him. From the outside, it looked as if the grandfather had simply forgotten to take his pills and had completely gone crazy. But upon closer inspection, it became clear that he understood perfectly well what he was doing. A fireball burst into flames near his finger, capable of incinerating everything around it. His shoulder jerked and his confident stance momentarily faltered. The old man, without hesitation, directed a stream of fire straight at his opponent. The one who was feared by the others turned into a charred corpse in seconds. The pungent smell of burnt meat quickly filled the museum. The old man didn't even look at the result, as if this was a common thing for him. After the world changed, Gilbert began working with a young and talented girl. Her name was Samantha, and her appearance was clearly misleading. These two were like demons unleashed from hell, not to be trifled with. Today, they have already cleared out the competitors and easily took all the necessary awards. Samantha just used magic to summon Anubis to her aid. She ordered the surviving players not to twitch or do anything stupid. The newcomers didn't take any risks and immediately threw their weapons on the floor. Samantha clapped her hands, clearly enjoying her power. At that moment, footsteps were heard. Calm, unhurried, and confident. Someone clearly ignored orders and acted as if nothing was happening around them. Alex walked slowly through the museum and looked at the destroyed antiques with surprise. His brazen calm made the team put on their demon masks again. Samantha coldly ordered Anubis to get rid of the worm. A huge black dog rushed forward, baring its jaws with dazzling white fangs. His spear had already claimed the lives of thousands of warriors, and a new victim loomed ahead. But this time, everything was different. The chosen one stood before him. With one precise movement, Alex parried the spear blow. He became the first person to defend himself after Samantha's attack. Mouths dropped open and the museum fell silent for a moment. Alex's mocking look made it clear that they were on completely different levels. Samantha flinched and began nervously sorting through the figurines in her backpack. She could bring these objects to life and took on the challenge with gusto. Samantha was sure that the second round would change everything because Anubis's squad had not yet said its word. The ability to hold 5 monsters at once showed her high level. It was not for nothing that she worked together with the old man who became famous for his incineration magic. Alex was not surprised by what was happening, and he finally decided to take action seriously. The overwhelming difference in strength was about to become apparent. Alex invested mana and revived the pine tiger. The nameless beast from the Joseon era inspired fear even at the instinctive level. The black dogs tried not to show panic, but their tails were already pressed to the floor. All that remained was to give the command and let the tiger begin the hunt. As soon as Alex gave the order, the monster rushed forward, not noticing the obstacles. One swift blow was enough to destroy the first dog. Anubis disintegrated into dark smoke, which quickly dissolved into the air of the museum. The tiger tore his opponents apart so quickly, it was as if someone had turned on the acceleration and thrown out the stop button. Samantha was left alone almost instantly, without her entourage and without support. Compared to this beast, she looked like a tiny ant, deprived of any protection. My heart was pounding in my chest and my legs seemed to have grown to the floor and stopped obeying me. At that very moment when death was very close, fear suddenly retreated. She sank to her knees and a tear of regret slowly rolled down her cheek. Looking at this guy, Samantha couldn't understand who he was and where he got such strength from. At the last moment, Alex stopped the monster and calmly approached his rival. To stay alive, she had to give up a sacred relic, the mask of Tutankhamun. Alex turned away, removed his hand, and, with a short gesture, ordered the beast to freeze. Many months later, Samantha would still play a role in his story. Now it's time to do other things and move up the museum. It would be foolish to miss the chance to obtain one of the most powerful skills in the Tower of Trials. On the next floor of the museum, an unusual silence and cold calm reigned. The old man stood next to Alex and didn't even think about a duel. Each of them was thinking about their own things and mentally reaching out to the main reward of the mission. All he had to do was step forward and take the relic, but the path was blocked by a protective barrier. It was a basic first-level barrier that blocked any physical and magical attacks. Even the Chosen One could not get inside without special tricks. Alex looked at Gilbert and calmly said that he knew how to solve this problem. The old man had to continuously press on the barrier with magic, gradually weakening the shield. This must be done until Alex returns with the necessary relics. While he's inside, Gilbert will continue to burn the barrier with fire. It's all pretty simple. The old man might not trust the young player, but he had no other choice. After thinking for a while, he agreed to the conditions and prepared himself for this strange performance. His old hands burst into flames, filling the dark room with bright light. The flames grew stronger and the air instantly became heavy and scorching. Gathering all his strength, Gilbert directed a stream of fire straight at the protective barrier. This was enough for Alex to slip inside without serious injury. Time was short. Gilbert's magic was rapidly approaching its limit. Alex nodded but lingered a second longer, as if he was in no hurry. There was a mocking look in his eyes, as if he was playing by his own rules. There were many artifacts stored inside, and the old man hardly understood which of them were truly valuable. Alex quickly looked around and noticed that someone had already been here and taken the Ding Dynasty iron sword. Judging by the choice, that player was clearly a swordsman. At the same time, he didn't even realize that he had passed by a truly important relic. Here lay coins of the Li Dynasty, each with a unique ability. For Alex, this was the missing piece of the puzzle to create a powerful skill. He collected a ceremonial Persian casting mold and the right eye of Tutankhamun's mask. By combining these relics, something truly special could be created. Right before our eyes, a merging of objects began, which over time would become commonplace. When the relics resonate with each other, something almost magical happens. The result was a relic called the Eyes of Truth. Alex combined 3 relics at once for the first time and received the Strange Fate Award. Now, he could copy and store many of this world's abilities. From now on, this skill will be the key to his path in the Tower of Trials. A second later, the old man reminded us of himself and announced that his magic was running out. Gilbert was sweating profusely and continued to press against the barrier with difficulty. Alex had been eyeing this skill for a long time and now decided to take it for himself. After all, only a fool would refuse the power of fire and the might of the phoenix. For many years, Gilbert hid his true feelings behind his usual mask. In order to copy his skill, it was necessary to force the old man to reveal his true self. It is not difficult to guess that, to do this, it is enough to simply make him angry, and then he will show his true face. Alex calmly replied that using the skill was not at all necessary. At first, the old man did not understand what this meant, and even wondered if the barrier was just a fake. The young player spoke the code word, and at that moment the barrier's protection disappeared. The magic had already been stopped, so Gilbert played no role in the blockade. Thanks to this prank, Gilbert was left without mana and with a very stupid expression on his face. The next step was to completely piss him off, and that promised to be all too easy. Alex knew literally everything about the Tower of Trials, as he had spent most of his life playing this game. Therefore, a map with information about 10 floors was of absolutely no use to him. When the old man noticed the lighter, he became even more nervous. The map was originally a dummy for a person who already knew everything. Alex calmly set it on fire and silently watched as it slowly burned to the ground. If the map had survived, someone might have gained knowledge of the 10 floors, and the secret of the special abilities would have been at risk. Alex simply got rid of unnecessary risks, and at the same time made the old man lose his temper. The fireman became so angry that he turned red like a boiled lobster. The conditions for copying the skill were automatically met. The system instantly congratulated the player and rewarded him with a fire element technique. Now this skill was stored in the world's memory, and it could be used in any unclear situation. While Alex was rejoicing at his success, the old man had no intention of calming down, preparing to give battle to the younger generation. The problem was that now his opponent was capable of doing the same, and Gilbert had no advantage left. After changing the world, he thought he was special, but now he was faced with the bitter truth. In the darkness, he saw the glow of red eyes and the gleam of white shark teeth. From that moment on, the old man had to listen to this guy. Otherwise, he would end up in a nursing home. A few minutes passed, and a calm, cool Alex left the museum. The number of truly experienced players in the museum was no more than 4, but only those who are willing to risk their lives will be able to get ahead of the entire planet. Now, the main character's task was simple: to master as many skills and abilities as possible. To do this, He gradually assembled a team and copied their skills. Even now, Samantha and Gilbert were ready to carry out any of his orders, just to save their lives. There was a long road ahead, but for a man who had just found the meaning of life, it brought real pleasure. He could copy other people's skills, but he intended to master the most powerful techniques alone. With all these thoughts about the future, Alex completely forgot about his usual hunger. The player hurried to a local cafe, where a frightened crowd had gathered. The news reported that 23 corpses and 50 wounded were found in the National Museum. People hunted for relics and quickly regretted it. The same thing was happening all over the world, so there was nothing surprising. Even the Louvre suffered serious damage, although it was always considered that the people there were more intelligent. Apparently, when chaos sets in, everyone turns into animals and begins to live by the laws of the jungle. Thanks to surveillance cameras, it was possible to capture the criminals. These people had special skills and were clearly ready to go all the way. Alex saw himself from the outside for the first time, as he had never even watched recordings of his streams before. Meanwhile, the government investigated the appearance of the tower and tried to somehow help people. As a result, a group called the Awakened Association was formed. This group included people with special abilities. The leader was a player named James, nicknamed Scar after being wounded in battle. He addressed players across the country and declared that he wanted to gather all the awakened. The association offered huge salaries and many privileges. The exception was the man shown on air, the very same player who robbed the Central Museum. If he joins the association, the government will agree to any of his conditions. Alex fell silent for a second, looking at the screen, and even the chat seemed to freeze along with him. It seems like he became a superstar so quickly, as if the system gave him a blue check mark before he even had a chance to say that he wasn't actually an influencer. At the same time, he was not so stupid as to work for the association, because one experienced player is worth 100 weaklings. Alex chuckled. The association was too obviously trying to turn him into a convenient tool. Apparently, the association boss really had a strong skill. If this is true, then copying his technique would be very useful. After dinner, Alex looked at the time and saw that it was already 7 in the evening. At this point, the testing tower opened to everyone. Billions of people around the world are finally immersed in a new world. It was no different from the game. It was just as cool, fresh, and deadly. All new players immediately received a few coins to acquire basic inventory. They were also told about the opportunity to broadcast their achievements and earn money from streaming. Now, everyone could watch the strongest players fight monsters and gods. At the same time, boosting views and any violation of the rules were strictly prohibited and punishable by death. The streaming system directly connected players with people outside the tower. Everyone will be watching the strongest and discussing their every move. For the mediocre, this meant nothing. But popularity promised huge amounts of money, and the race for success officially began. Alex didn't intend to be the first to post videos and give away information for free. Like an experienced grandmaster, he intended to pause, and only then attract the crowd's attention. When he first attempted to pass the testing tower, difficulties overtook him almost immediately. The first 30 floors seemed like real hell. Then he realized that his entire progress had been built completely wrong. Long years of hard work suddenly became worthless. Alex hovered over the delete character button and hesitated for a few seconds before pressing it. Tears rolled down my face and my gaze stubbornly avoided the mirror and the recognition of my own defeat. He erased the save, exhaled, and entered the tower as if it was his last chance. 6 long years had passed since that day, and now he had to take the first step again. Now he knew everything, and without hesitation he headed into the labyrinth of the Minotaur. When the doors swung open, a cold wind made him shiver. It was damp and dark inside, and the air felt thick like mud. Walking further, Alex noticed the newcomers who had arrived here almost immediately after him. Among them was a beautiful and very friendly girl named Linda. Just 10 minutes ago, she and her friends were closely watching the actions of the Chosen One. They decided to take a risk and follow, although it looked more like suicide. If a first-level player has entered, it means it's definitely safe there. Classic beginner logic. This turned out to be their main mistake, because they greatly overestimated their capabilities. They followed Alex, not realizing that they were going on a date with death. Only at first glance did Linda seem like a friendly and sweet girl. With the eye of truth, one could quickly see who she really was. She was only 22 years old, but she already had a lot of life experience behind her. She had a technique for quickly getting close to strangers. This skill will allow Alex to negotiate even with the devil's daughter in the future. Linda's closest friend has long been Patrick, known for his caution and attention to detail. All the other team members were frankly mediocre players. None of them had ever been through the testing tower before, and now they resembled frightened ants. Alex decided to appear as a kind and friendly guy. He didn't even try to remember their names because he was only interested in his own progress. Linda immediately tried to use her approaching skills. She only needed to touch another person, and he would immediately feel a slight feeling of love. This technique worked well with ordinary people, but not with those who were called the chosen ones. Alex didn't pay attention to her tricks and calmly continued moving through the labyrinth. This place was known for periodically changing its structure. Almost immediately after this warning, the labyrinth began to rebuild. The newcomers panicked and began to scurry about, swarming like worms in damp earth. The stone blocks moved in different directions, and this was enough to create complete chaos. When it was all over, none of them understood exactly what had happened. Only Alex maintained his cool calm and kept a close eye on the walls of the labyrinth. The newbies finally realized that this test was too dangerous for the first level. Linda decided to leave the maze and asked her friend to find a way out. The search skill worked exactly until the moment when the labyrinth changed its structure again. From that moment on, getting out of here became almost impossible, at least for beginners. The real game was about to begin, and only a shark could survive in this ocean of madness. Linda immediately lost her temper and blamed Alex for all the problems. According to her, it was because of him that they almost died, and now he is obliged to get them out of here. Alex looked at her like she was a stupid girl and reminded her that in the jungle it was every man for himself. It's time for them to get used to the fact that the world has changed, and now it's too late to cry and call mommy for help. One of the guys decided to protect his friend and pulled out a sword. He imagined himself a hero and didn't even notice how danger was creeping up on him. A huge monster jumped out of nowhere and killed him with one blow. Let's not forget why this labyrinth belongs to the Minotaur. It is here that a monster lives, who enjoys hunting stupid people. The battle began without warning or unnecessary formalities. Some tried to defend themselves, while others immediately realized that this was the end. Compared to the newbies, Alex looked like Giga Chad, who had been mistakenly thrown into the children's difficulty mode. He rushed forward, not looking back at the risks, and challenged the monster. His speed and flexibility allowed him to dodge even the heaviest blows. Everything happened almost like in a game, but this time there was no room for error. The battle with the Minotaur turned out to be much more interesting than battles with other players. The monster, imbued with the tower's mana, had outstanding characteristics. From past experience, Alex knew that it was impossible to avoid battles in the early levels. Only by challenging your own destiny can you truly progress. If he doesn't raise his stats right now, death awaits him on the next floor. Alex's body was only at the beginning of the journey, but his mind knew exactly what to do. Proper defense allowed one to improve agility and speed. Every successful deviation brought progress closer and was rewarded by the system. For a long time, the newcomers couldn't believe that all this was actually happening. This man was on a transcendental level, like an angel descended from heaven. Compared to him, even the Minotaur looked slow and clumsy. At some point, everyone got tired of this carnage. even the main character himself. The newcomers decided to take advantage of the pause and tried to escape to a safe place. Alex was categorically against it and suggested that they stay until the end. If they want to get the main reward, they will have to fight monsters with it. For each attack they dodge, they will receive points and level up. None of the newcomers wanted to take such a risk. It sounded like madness to them. The snotty and frightened children quickly regretted ever having entered the Minotaur's labyrinth. When it seemed that death was inevitable, the labyrinth began to change its structure again. This was the main essence of the mission. You need to face the monster again and again, defend yourself from its attacks, and gradually progress. After this, any newbie who emerges from the labyrinth will become an experienced and fearless pirate. The only problem is that not everyone will survive. After her first encounter with the monster, Linda's enthusiasm vanished completely. Most of her team died, finding themselves completely unprepared for the reality of the labyrinth. There's a whole month left until the release, and it's time to finally accept the rules of this game. If Linda and Patrick want to survive, they will have to follow Alex's example. At first, they didn't understand this and decided to go separately, and this became their main mistake. Only he knew the labyrinth better than anyone else and understood how to get out of it. The newcomers quickly took back their words and joined the experienced player, but they were immediately made to understand. In this world, you have to pay for everything. If they want to survive, they will have to give all their money to this fearless wolf. The fight for money through streaming has already begun. Many players have realized that streaming is a full-fledged weapon and influence on society. Here you can rise from the filth and become a prince in a couple of days, even if yesterday you were nobody. That's exactly what a young noob from Korea, nicknamed a pirate named Jack, did. The comments under his videos were literally exploding. Everyone admired this guy's technique, and his fame quickly spread throughout the country. Jack's entire team celebrated their success and the first coins they had earned. They decided to put their popularity to good use and expand their influence by creating a guild. The pirate was confident that he was the best of the Korean players until new comments appeared. It turned out that there is a person who clears such dungeons 3 times faster, and he had many times more views than Jack. The pirate began to sweat and ordered that this competitor be shown to him immediately. After seeing the boy's skills, he never considered himself special again. Now let's rewind time and return to the labyrinth of the Minotaur. Alex took all the money from the allies and ordered them to do the dirty work. They had to light a fire, prepare a place to spend the night, and get food. In order not to waste time, the protagonist decided to focus on his own development. He quickly exchanged the accumulated points for several useful artifacts. It was just trash that only made sense when combined. After a successful fusion, the Queen of Fortune skill was obtained. Blind faith in luck can lead to disaster, but if you keep the balance, luck allows you to survive where others perish. When his luck level increased, Alex directed the effect to his new dagger. The weapon received a top-level upgrade and was rewarded with 5,000 coins. Alex recorded several videos showing his swordsman technique. This ensured a rapid growth in subscribers and popularity. The torment in the labyrinth continued, and after 10 days the newcomers looked completely exhausted. They could not even imagine that they would have to live in such conditions. Sleeping on cold stones and smelly mushrooms became their daily reality. Alex was always nearby, paying almost no attention to them. During the day he fought with the Minotaur, and in the evening he fell asleep peacefully without any doubts. He was the only one who remained completely cool. Linda was used to a comfortable life, as she grew up in a wealthy family and didn't need anything. She used all her connections, trying to find a way out of the labyrinth, but to no avail. The brother promised to help, but only after completing his next mission. The members of his guild promised to destroy Alex and get the girl out of the labyrinth. At some point, Linda and Patrick decided to kill the man who turned them into slaves. Having gotten rid of him, one could hide in a safe zone and wait for help. Patrick was the first to act and grab the nearest stone in his hand. Only at the last moment did Linda dissuade him from this crazy act. She knew that Alex had too fast a reaction and that this method would not kill him. It was necessary to act more cunningly and add a little poison capable of killing even 100 trolls. The plan seemed perfect, and the girl's inner demons quietly laughed with delight. A few hours later, Alex finally woke up and got his well-deserved breakfast. It was clearly not a work of art. One had to eat mushrooms collected in the corners of the labyrinth. The partners had the same dish, and they behaved quite calmly. As Alex brought the food to his mouth, a cold bead of sweat slowly rolled down Linda's face. She smiled and, along with Patrick, decided that their suffering was over. It was a brilliant plan that was never destined to come to fruition. Within a moment, Patrick began to choke on black resin. Convulsions racked his entire body, and his internal organs felt like they were trying to burst out. He died a horrible death, having first gone mad from pain. Alex stood up calmly and made it clear that he had been one step ahead all this time. He saw the conspiracy in advance thanks to a hidden camera and broadcast. Now he will file a complaint against Linda and make her life even more problematic. The system does not encourage attacks on other players and backstabbing. The complaint was accepted, and, as a penalty, Linda lost all her subscribers. After that, she seemed to instantly forget about what had happened. The Minotaur appeared ahead again, quite hungry over the past few weeks. The frightened girl again hid behind the man she had recently tried to destroy. She seemed to have no conscience at all, but that didn't stop her from calling Alex a good man. She had no idea that Alex had just fulfilled the conditions for copying her skills. You had to spend at least 240 hours with Linda to win over other people with her charisma. Now he doesn't need her anymore, and he's ready to get rid of her as an unnecessary burden. This was the price of the protagonist's knowledge. He always remained alone, isolated from society, so as not to share his skills. This made him feel more comfortable, as he had spent most of his life alone in a rented apartment. Linda tried to summon her brother's guild members to destroy him, but looking at Alex's skills, with each passing second I realized that this was impossible. Now, instead of constantly defending himself, Alex went on the offensive. He no longer simply dodged, but counterattacked and even decided to fry the Minotaur. The monster, accustomed to dominance, finally felt the response of aggression. It was that very moment when he was ready to reveal his last trump card. The Labyrinth Guardian activated his berserker skill and roared, as if summoning all the power of the abyss. From that moment on, a battle began that made Alex's broadcasts worth watching. The channel's subscribers nicknamed him Asura, as if the god of war, the final boss, and YouTube's algorithms had been combined into one build. The Minotaur went into a frenzy and rushed forward to destroy the Matador. Asura prepared his special sword and waited for the perfect moment. He deliberately created a pause, luring his opponent into a trap. The precise blow of the sword made the Minotaur growl in pain. The more hits the monster received, the more ferocious and uncontrollable it became. His attacks became sweeping and predictable, and this played into the opponent's hands. Every second of the battle brought Alex pure, almost painful pleasure. At some point in his life, he got stuck and realized that he couldn't go on like this. The game became the only place for him where he felt alive. After going through all the stages of the testing tower, Alex was sure that he would again slide into depression. But the world had changed, and he had a new chance. The reality of the testing tower resonated with his talents and abilities. Now he had become significant again, and, drawing on his experience, could save humanity from destruction. That's why even a battle with a Minotaur is a real thrill for him. The monster quickly started having problems. The frenzy skill provides a boost for only a few minutes, after which a penalty is imposed for the entire day. During this period, the Minotaur falls into a deep sleep and can be easily destroyed. Any newbie would have finished off the sleeping monster without hesitation, but Alex only took a step back and stopped the fight. He wants to get the most out of this place, so he plans to fight the Minotaur for 3 more weeks in a row. Linda looked at the closed exit of the labyrinth and slowly squeezed her fingers, realizing the deadline. She will have to be patient and get used to being in a relationship with this narcissistic, handsome man. The next 20 days flew by. The labyrinth, filled with cold and chaos, did not allow one to relax for a second. While Asura fought the monster, Linda tried to remember his every move. Gradually, it became clear that the moment of separation and choice of path was already near. Alex looked at Linda longer than usual, remembering every sharp step she took behind his back. It would be nice to take this girl with me if she promises never to misbehave again. Alex hasn't believed in words for a long time. He needs benefits and clear guarantees. He leaned closer and quietly said a few words, after which Linda stopped breathing. To somehow make amends for her guilt, she promised to give Brahman's ring. This is one of the best artifacts available on the first floor. The ring increases movement speed and suppresses monsters' mana. Just what she needed, so Linda can rest easy for now. Alex quickly announced the terms and immediately moved on to signing the contract. This skill will become one of the key ones in his future career. The contract allows you to bind other players and completely control their actions. Now Linda is forced to work with him and will no longer be able to betray him. No matter how hard she resisted, the soul mark appeared right on her face. After long trials, the labyrinth of the Minotaur finally opened its gates. It was nice to breathe fresh air again and smell the grass. Linda received the promised reward and increased her stats. Unfortunately for her, Alex took all her money without hesitation. He then ordered that the Brahmin ring be brought to him within 3 days. She must meet her brother and retrieve the artifact. Otherwise, punishment will follow. The Soul Brand will not allow her to break the agreement. The news reported that in a week, Korea's strongest guild, Dangun, will try to defeat the third-floor boss. Players from all over the world fight in the tower, but each country has its own local guild war. Initially, Chinese players were supposed to help the Koreans. However, the connection was never established, which raised doubts about the assault. Alex called them fools who were rushing things too much. Newbies grab resources, forgetting to turn on their brains. Each level is given 3 months, and this cannot be ignored. It's much wiser to spend time on leveling up and preparing. Alex remembered dozens of bodies at the foot of the floors, those who walked without a foundation. There will be no second chance here, and you will have to get used to it. Returning home, Asura gathered information about the events of the past month. He decided to turn to people he could really trust. In the past, they were the same nerds as he was and lived inside the game. A cheerful and happy guy, Mark, known by the nickname Baldhead, and the tough Principal Jessica, who was called the Fire Fist. In reality, they looked almost nothing like their game avatars. Nevertheless, Alex was pleased to have assembled his first full team. Mark was renowned for his Machine King skill in long-range combat. Jessica, on the other hand, is a master of close combat, hardened by the Fire Fist technique. It's enough to reach the 20th floor, and their skills can be copied automatically. Meeting with his friends, Alex suddenly remembered his old nickname, Mr. Stinky. No one remembered where it came from, but for some reason, the shame from it remained. Alex chuckled. The internet, like a toxic ex, never forgets anything, and everything will definitely come up. There was no need to rush anywhere. Time seemed to stand still, and the tension slowly left my heart. There were always people around who were ready to use him at the first opportunity. Previously, Alex had to constantly look back and wait for a blow in the back. Now he sat quietly, and for the first time in a long time, did not keep his hand on the weapon. The conversation made it clear how far the world's guilds had gone. The first streamer trends and true superstars of the new era have emerged. Of mains, groups that kidnap people en masse came up separately. Mark reminded us of the test, which can no longer be ignored. Skills must be confirmed as quickly as possible, otherwise the path forward is closed. As players poured into the tower, the death counter began to rise alarmingly quickly. The association has introduced a restriction. Only those who have passed a test are allowed onto the second floor. In words, everything seemed logical, but the catch was too obvious. Essentially, it was a collection of data on strong players for the association's boss, Mr. James. Alex decided to use this system to his advantage and impose his own rules. After the association was established, weak players effectively became ordinary people, and the strongest instantly turned into stars and dispersed among influential guilds. Now, 3 types of people were gathered for testing: those who want to enter the tower, those who want to make a name for themselves, and already established superstars. The Dark Raven Guild was attracting attention with its rising star, Cedric. It was he who was Linda's brother and the owner of the Brahmin ring. A little later, Brian from the Father of Fighting Guild appeared in front of the journalists. He hated attention and could lose his temper at any second. Security guards literally pulled reporters apart, trying to prevent a conflict. Alex and his friends stood nearby and pointedly ignored what was happening. He seemed not to hear the guards and had no intention of leaving. Cedric approached the newcomer with such confidence as if it were a rap battle and the producer had already promised a contract. He pushed Alex and demanded that he immediately clear the way. With the help of the Eye of Truth, Azura instantly assessed his opponent. The deadly attack skill could be copied if the hostility was pushed to the extreme. Alex was better than most at provoking people. When Linda saw her brother, she caught her breath. She begged him to stop and leave, but he didn't listen to her. Alex seized the moment and sharply twisted the fingers of the self-confident fool. This was enough for Cedric to be disgraced in front of the crowd. In a rage, he activated the skill and rushed forward for revenge. The air thickened. Everyone felt that something was about to break. Alex was the first to throw the water bottle, disrupting his opponent's focus. Then he stepped forward and hit me hard in the knee. The move was dirty, fast, and perfect for a show-off scene. Linda was trembling with fear and did not even dare to take her brother's side. Only Brian intervened, deciding to put an end to this circus at the association office. Alex couldn't analyze it. The difference in levels was too great. It was immediately obvious. This was real titanium, not susceptible to manipulation. But Alex knew that experience was often more important than brute force. Sometimes it's not the size that wins, but how you use it. It is unknown from where, but Azura knows the secret of this guy, who has been delivering ginseng to China for many years. He also knows that there are serious problems with ginseng, and it no longer provides the desired properties to players. This problem is easy to get rid of. You just need to carefully eradicate the side effects without destroying the root itself. Hearing these words, Brian instantly used the dungeon skill. He cut himself and Alex off from everyone else, completely isolating the space and leaving him alone. No one could interfere with their conversation, and everything that happened inside the black cube remained a secret forever. Instead of rushing in and tearing the guy to pieces, Brian, to everyone's surprise, decided to talk first. He realized that he was facing a truly talented player who knew too much, especially about mana recovery and endurance with ginseng. The problem was that when newbies used this root, they suffered en masse from a side effect: magical poisoning. To get rid of this problem, Alex calmly suggested using just 3 additional ingredients: Carassian juice, moonstone, and mandrake root, he said, would completely solve the situation. These words completely coincided with the intelligence reports and research results. Brian looked at the mysterious guy as if the creator of the Tower of Trials himself was standing in front of him. However, he drew his sword and coldly threatened that he would not tolerate any insults in public. It's high time this guy realized that he's not the one dictating the terms here. Alex only has to want it, and his entire career can end in an instant. By that time, A real meat grinder had already begun in the association's office. Asura's friends did not allow their ally to be insulted behind his back. They made it clear without further ado that they would easily break the ribs and knock out the teeth of anyone who decided to make a joke at the wrong time. A few minutes later, the iron cube vanished, and the two players went their separate ways without saying another word. Alex was clearly pleased with the negotiations and gestured for everyone to calm down. It seems that a common language was finally found, and the situation was temporarily under control. Cedric tried his best to provoke Brian to continue the fight. He couldn't believe that this man would endure humiliation, while Alex would get away with it. The little brat should have understood that the grown-ups would figure out what to do themselves. If he continues to give out his stupid advice, he will very quickly go to meet the devil. Cedric was seething with anger, as if he had just found out that his favorite rapper P. Diddy was at the center of a scandal again, and there were no more excuses left. He grew up in a wealthy family, and since childhood he hated being humiliated in front of others. At the very moment when Cedric broke away and stepped forward with a murderous glare, the system silently recorded the copying of the skill. Alex killed 2 birds with 1 stone, after which he calmly walked away as if nothing had happened. It's time to test your skills and get an official rating. All that was needed was to strike the magic stone for the hidden power to be reflected on the sensors. Of the 3 stones offered, Asura chose the largest one without hesitation. He was advised not to make a hero of himself and to act more carefully. Alex didn't listen to these words and immediately released his red death aura. The Hurricane of Madness skill was activated, and a deafening explosion from the impact was heard. Many players fail to qualify because they do not have enough magical power to damage even a small stone. Alex managed to split a huge stone in half, and this clearly indicated a high level. He scored an impressive number of points, and the administrator immediately ran to report what had happened to his boss. After this, the main character went out into the corridor and met Linda. She kept her promise and brought him the Brahmin ring. The girl sincerely hoped that, thanks to this, she would finally get rid of the mark on her face, not realizing that it would stay with her forever. Somehow, Alex achieved a middle rank and greatly surprised his friends. Most likely, he managed to come to an agreement with one of the employees to hide his true strength. His friends couldn't understand how this was possible since his skills were clearly at a high level. The whole secret was that Alex did not want to attract unnecessary attention and preferred to remain in the shadows. Moreover, this was only the first test, and the second stage awaited him, one of the tower's dungeons. Instead of choosing the safe route, he decided to go to where she lived. No one has yet been able to pass through this restricted area, although there have been plenty of people willing to do so. Many years after his first attempt, Alex finally returned to this place again. Today, a whole crowd of people gathered in the mountain ruins to try their luck. With an average rank, it is impossible to enter the abode of the fallen alone. So I had to sign up as an assistant in the guild and play the role of an ordinary worker. As a porter, it is easy to remain unnoticed and calmly wait for the right moment to take action. Many weak players do dirty work just to make some money. Everyone has their own reason. Some are saving for university, while others are simply trying to support their family. Now they were resting and waiting for the raid group to join the team. Unexpectedly, Alex received a special reward for the first conqueror of the tower. He spent most of his life playing this game, and he really deserved something like this. He now has 2 additional skills, luck and adaptability. Together they form a cold heart, allowing one to remain calm even in critical moments. There are many rewards in the tower, but getting even one is already a great success. The wait is over. The raid group finally appears at the entrance to the dungeon. Ken became the leader of the team because he is one of the most talented members of the Parhay Guild. To copy his steel defense skill, you need to earn this guy's trust. The team gathered and soon entered the dungeon. One of the sorceresses activated the lamp, illuminating the dark perimeter. The surroundings were damp. There was a smell of rot, and an ominous premonition of disaster hung in the air. The atmosphere was such that even the most desperate romantic would understand that this was not a place for dates, but a hardcore mode without saving. More than one group of players has died in this dungeon, so now only death row inmates go there. The regular porters struggled to move forward, clutching their weapons with sweaty hands. The detachment that had been here longer than the others had not yet lost a single fighter. Among them were foreigners in golden armor. If you look more closely, it becomes clear that there is a special warrior among them. Alex decided to use his charisma technique and start a conversation with the fragile girl. He handed her a flask of cold water and received a warm smile in response. When she removed her protective helmet, a bright aura momentarily illuminated the dark abyss of the dungeon. The youngest daughter of the aristocratic Laurentia family from Europe stood directly in front of the protagonist. She is known as a versatile player who combines divine power and offensive skills. It was Teresa who once saved Amsterdam from chaos and became one of the most famous players in Europe. For these achievements, she was nicknamed the Holy Angel of Amsterdam, and due to the difference in levels, her skills could not be seen. Teresa was one of the top 100 players in the world, and to copy her abilities it was necessary to save a girl from a life-threatening situation. Many have tried to win her heart, but so far, no one has been able to make it beat faster. Alex began to carefully surround Teresa with attention and care. It was a well-thought-out tactic that could earn him the heavenly protection skill in the future. It only remained to be seen what kind of threat could become dangerous even for such a powerful paladin. After some time, screams were heard and the first signs of chaos appeared. Deep in the dungeon, another squad of players was discovered, almost completely destroyed. Ruined guards towered overhead, silently watching the border trespassers. One of the newcomers activated one of the guards, and trouble became inevitable. Ken ordered everyone to stick closer together and look around carefully. The only hope remained the Holy Angel of Amsterdam, always ready to come to the rescue. Soon, heavy footsteps were heard. The guards had finally awakened. Some players didn't pay any attention to this and didn't even have time to prepare for the fight. Everything that happened next was difficult to describe in words. Blood filled the corridor, and this turned out to be only the beginning of the nightmare. The worst fears had come true, and now only a miracle could bring this detachment home alive. The main part of the group was in another wing of the dungeon, but their situation was no better. Panic was setting in there too, and the feeling of impending danger was weighing on everyone. Higher-level players gripped their weapons and prepared to fight. They had prepared a battle plan in advance, pressed shield to shield, thrust their spears forward and froze, turning the formation into a dense, almost indestructible living wall. The sorceress activated the angel's song, and the air trembled with light, magic, and power. The sight was powerful and truly impressive, but only experienced players understood that, in the Tower of Trials, external beauty has no meaning. What matters here is not the effect, but the effectiveness, and it is this that allows us to avoid inevitable death. Finally, what they had all gathered here for began. A battle filled with blood, fear, and brutal spectacle. The guards resembled living knights, whose massive armor and height were several times greater than human ones. Due to the screams and panic, the leader had to harshly shut everyone up and order them to focus exclusively on the fight. He didn't care about individual players. Ken was completely focused on the structure and preservation of the team. He didn't even turn around at the shouts from the flank and continued giving orders, as if he had already crossed out unnecessary names from the list of the living. Unlike guilds, which acted in a coordinated and cool manner, solo players would immediately become lost at the critical moment. Faced with a real threat, they felt as if they had been abandoned to their fate. Without training and teamwork, instead of taking action, they began to panic, cry, and call for help from their mother. They were incredibly lucky to have by their side the girl who was called the Holy Angel of Amsterdam. For the first time in months, Teresa found herself in a truly fierce battle. She immediately showed what she was capable of and instilled bright rays of hope even into the hearts of the most broken loners. The situation in the rear guard was much worse, since no one was going to protect the ordinary workers. Most of them had already met the devil, and the rest just silently waited their turn. The guard spared no one, and the cold aura of the dungeon drove people forward like driven racehorses. When it seemed that there was no hope left, a man appeared among them who decided to challenge fate itself. Alex managed to cover his surviving ally and finally stopped playing the role of a weakling. Now he did what he had come here for in the first place. He activated the flame and began methodically destroying the monsters. One truly powerful blow was enough to cause the huge guard to crumble into small pieces. After this, Alex approached his friend and deliberately scared him with an impressive knife in his hand. At that moment, Teresa appeared out of nowhere and pulled out the wounded porter as if he really needed urgent help. Seeing the knife, the blood on the floor, and the frightened man, she stepped between Alex and the porter without hesitation. Apparently, she watched too many investigative shows, where the most dangerous maniac always turns out to be a quiet and inconspicuous guy. Teresa tried to detain Alex and almost immediately ran into serious difficulties. No matter what she said or how she tried to stop him, he did not even allow her to touch him. The holy angel became angry and walked forward as if she was fighting against the strongest monster. Another defensive move ended with Teresa hitting her head hard against the stone wall. Alex easily twisted her arm and stopped, leaving only a finger's distance between the blade and her throat. At that moment, the porter ran up and hastily explained that it was Alex who had saved his life in the first place. Teresa immediately realized what she had done and very quickly apologized for her mistake. They quickly settled the conflict and pretended that nothing serious had happened. After this, the young heroes met and continued to search for survivors in the depths of the dungeon. Alex knew very well that Teresa came here to secretly obtain the St. Peter's contract for the career choice quest. Neither beauty nor acting could deceive him. He knew all the strategies for getting through these ruins. To speed up the process, he suddenly suggested acting together. Perhaps the guy, who had been a loner all his life, finally succumbed to the charms and became interested in the Dutch beauty. When they returned to the guild, Ken did not immediately understand what exactly they wanted from him. He couldn't believe that there would be madmen willing to go on a solo dungeon raid. Teresa calmly explained that she was not going to listen to anyone and would act as she saw fit. Ken didn't want to weaken the team and lose their strongest warrior, but he had no choice. He only asked Teresa to come back if the plan got out of control or the situation became critical. Everyone understood that this was a one-way ticket, and no one wanted to be on the suicide squad. It was at this moment that Alex raised his hand and pre-introduced himself as a volunteer. His friends immediately grabbed him by the back, trying to stop him and prevent him from going to his death. Alex quickly analyzed the situation and realized that he needed to play beautifully and confidently. He declared it was love at first sight, so convincingly, it seemed as if he was ready to give an interview to CNN immediately after the fight. The men were shocked but said nothing more, for they all knew that love truly looked like madness. They decided that the stupid boy had simply gone crazy, and without further ado, they let him go his own way. That is how Asura found himself next to the holy angel, and everything that happened next will forever remain part of the tower's history. The dungeon was a network of corridors and halls filled with a wide variety of monsters. Here you could meet zombies, goblins, orcs, and even ancient vampires hiding in the depths of the shadows. In one of the central halls was the Treaty of St. Peter, hidden inside a massive sarcophagus. Removing the relic's protection will take some effort, especially given the latest system update. Players were made to understand that the abode of the fallen was watching their every move, meaning the boss had not been sleeping for a long time. Alex had immediately said that he knew a way to get through this stage, and now Teresa was trying to figure out what role she played in his plan. He briefly outlined the strategy, and within a few seconds the monsters heard rustling sounds on the second floor. Teresa, like a mad angel, jumped down and challenged hundreds of monsters. It was probably all down to the paladin's active skill known as Songs of Battle. This technique increases all stats by 3 times for the next 10 minutes. Alex quickly and clearly outlined the task. Teresa must attract maximum attention to herself. It seems she had succeeded in this. The monsters rushed towards her from all sides, forgetting about everything else. While the perverted creatures went mad with aggression, the girl kept her cool and prepared her sword for the slaughter. At the moment the technique was activated, sunlight blinded everyone hiding in the shadows. Then the massacre began, brutal, merciless, as if 2 full-fledged armies had clashed. Teresa had no intention of sparing anyone, and destroyed monsters as if she was born to do just that. Taking advantage of the chaos, her partner quickly ran over the heads of the skeletons and ended up behind them. For a moment he relaxed and even felt immortal, forgetting about the additional protection. It was here that the elite undead hid, the risen sage, as previous players called him. It was essentially a smaller version of the boss, but it still presented a serious fight. Besides the great sage, there were also guards here, ready to crush Alex's spine. Although Teresa garnered most of the attention, it was her partner who bore the brunt of the work. The wizard used black lightning and constantly pressed from a long distance. While it was still possible to deal with the guards, protection from magic required maximum concentration. Thanks to his good reaction, Alex managed to dodge, and the spell destroyed the sarcophagus's protective barrier. If the boss finds out about this, someone in the Monster Association will definitely have their salary taken away for this month. Taking advantage of the confusion, Ashura launched a frontal attack without hesitation. The guards took the fight head-on and were scattered into pieces. The magic dagger showed its best side again, although this was only the beginning. Teresa had almost completed her part of the plan too. All that remained was to destroy the main skeleton, and the relic in the sarcophagus would be left unprotected. Everything pointed to the beginning of the final battle, but it was at this moment that the plot took a sharp turn. The great sage was beheaded, and his skull shattered under the pressure of the blow. Alex read the monster's movements like an open book and moved calmly, as if he was afraid of nothing. At that moment, the great swordsman pointed his blade at him and, with cold aggression, declared that this was their first meeting since the world changed. Alex himself was at a loss for a second. He didn't recognize this man at all. Another awkward scene ruined the climax, although everything started so well. Only after opening the characteristics did it become clear that in front of him was the same swordsman who had stolen the weapon from the museum. His name was Leonard, a man obsessed with winning, being at the top of the rankings and eternal rivalry. When the tower was a game, he looked different and constantly bothered Alex. They clashed in different places and conditions, but the outcome was almost always the same. Leonard, nicknamed Stalker, lost even when victory was within his grasp. However, he never stopped and tried to take revenge again and again. This guy was a real annoying leech, and was clearly going to cause a lot more trouble. Instead of letting Alex complete the mission in peace, he challenged him again. Stalker was sure that his opponent now had no advantage because, in real life, everything is different. Asura did not want to prolong the conflict and decided to enlist Teresa's help. She had just destroyed the last of the monsters and was ready to deal with the Stalker without further ado. Leo immediately used battlefield selection, a skill that allows him to transport his opponent to a separate space. By this time, Alex had already managed to get closer and destroy part of the sarcophagus. He took out a small black ball from there, then looked Teresa in the eyes and smiled faintly. They would meet again, but now he had to accept the fight with the main rival of his life. Leonard's skill transported them to another room in the dungeon, where nothing could interfere with the battle. Then a duel technique was activated, reducing the enemy's characteristics. For the average player, this meant a death sentence, but not for the guy who didn't care. He knew that he would pick up another skill and become even stronger before climbing to the next floor. Alex activated the sword song technique and increased his stats by 200%. Now he finally felt as if he had been reborn. For many years, Stalker waited for an opportunity for revenge and had no intention of sitting back and defending himself. He walked forward and started throwing punches from different angles, like a young Mike Tyson. Alex calmly held his defense and gradually irritated his opponent. He knew Leonard had always had problems with self-control and delusions of grandeur. Since childhood, he considered himself better than others, and that is why he played the test tower until the very end. When the world changed, Leonard had a chance to prove to everyone around him and to himself that he was actually the best. That's why he went all in now, without even noticing the moment when Alex used the artifact. The sword's song combined with the demon's soul, giving birth to an ability called Sword Graveyard. His swordsmanship skills were enhanced by 500%, and from that moment on, Asura became a martial arts genius. Controlling such power required a huge amount of mana, and now there were problems with that. Despite this, the superiority was so overwhelming that Stalker immediately felt it. He remembered again how he lost to this guy time and time again and felt like a loser. His life lost its meaning because up until that moment, the testing tower had been everything to him. Screaming in fear of yet another defeat, Leonard called upon the powers of the elements to help. They clashed again to finally determine the winner. Stalker's sword couldn't withstand the pressure and flew off to the side. He lost, never being able to surpass himself in the new version of the world. Now he was ready to accept defeat like a man and die by the blade. Asura did not stain the ground with blood and decided to use Stalker for his own interests. Behind the calm smile hid cold calculation and a desire to use Leonard. They shook hands and Alex automatically copied his skill. After this, it was time to part ways, realizing that fate would bring them together again. Meanwhile, we return to the guilds and individuals who have defeated the bulk of the monsters. People finally relaxed a little when the system detected the approach of something strange. A lone monster was moving straight towards them, resembling a goblin gone mad. Nobody paid any attention to it, and that's when chaos began that could no longer be stopped. The huge Iron Knight continued to move while the players did not understand how to stop him. On his shoulders sat a strange man with long ears and deathly pale skin. The guild leader immediately recognized the higher vampire and whispered to everyone not to move. This wasn't Twilight. This vampire's name was Bellis, and he bowed slowly, greeting the guests. He was called a guide, one who introduces visitors to the local Lord of Ruins. The players, feeling the numerical advantage, had no intention of retreating and drew their swords. They threatened the vampire, trying to understand what he was planning and why he came here. Bellis calmly offered cooperation and said that everyone should follow him. He then cut his finger and warned about the activation of the blood plague skill. The vampire's blood spread across the ground and turned into a living creature. The players screamed and tried to attack the blood, but it only made things worse. Several newcomers found themselves completely covered in blood and suffocating, unable to escape. Then the same fate befell almost half of all the assembled warriors. The captain could do nothing about it, and helplessness and incomprehension were visible in his eyes. They were forced to go along with Bellis, while Alex and Teresa suspected nothing. The Holy Angel of Amsterdam also received his reward for his mission. She managed to obtain the highest level frozen tear. When consumed, this artifact enhances magic, increases stats, and restores health. After the absorption, the system notified the players that they were invited to the private chambers of the local lord. If they want to save the party members, they must go to the farthest room and meet the dungeon master. Once the invitation is accepted, all monsters and traps will be deactivated. Teresa immediately began to blame herself for everything that happened and almost burst into tears. She went with the players to help them in their time of need, and was not there when they were attacked. Now she's not even sure if she can save her team and destroy the Lord. The local boss is really strong because this dungeon has never been cleared before. Teresa always had a messiah complex. She wanted to save people even when nothing depended on her. None of this had anything to do with Stalker, which is probably why he decided to simply walk away. Finally, he said a few words to Teresa and warned her of the danger. Leonard knew that Alex always thought only of himself. He was selfish and was ready to step over people for the sake of success. Sooner or later he will leave her, but there is still something good in him. If anyone can defeat the local lord, it's this man. After listening to the swordsman's words, the girl remained confused and, for several seconds, did not know what to do next. She realized that she needed to be careful with Alex, but no one else was ready to help save the team of players. If he helps her again, she promises to pay any price. After a short pause, Asura agreed, accepted the quest, and prepared for battle. The monsters automatically fell into hibernation, and the two grandmasters calmly reached the last room of the dungeon. There was such a volume of mana felt here that it felt like the blood was starting to cool in the veins. Now it became clear how strong the local lord was, and it was not too late to turn around and return to the warm nest. It's not always the strongest who wins a battle. Sometimes a good plan is enough to win the grand prize. They still decided to take a risk, but for this, Teresa must completely trust her ally, otherwise nothing will work. When the giant doors opened, the first thing the players noticed was the smell of blood. Inside, there were many people in red hoods, with pale skin and dark eyes. Belis internally mocked the players like a producer of a new TV series. Come on in, the season finale has already been signed, and spoiler alert, you're expendable. On the main throne sat she, hot on the outside and cold on the inside, Alice von Ataraxia. By this point, she was already tired of waiting. Hunger was gradually driving her crazy, and even her lips had turned pale. With a snap of her fingers, she opened a portal and revealed that all the players were safe and sound. Cedric was among the hostages, and now it finally became clear who woke the guards. Only this fool could have provoked the conflict, although his motives remained unclear. Alice deliberately left them alive because she was intrigued by the smell coming from Alex. She loved the smell of blood, and this guy's scent was unlike any other person's. Her perverted behavior was starting to be frightening, and she hadn't even done anything yet. The player honestly admitted that he had no intention of being anyone's lunch, and immediately almost lost his head. He managed to dodge, although the fiery beam still scratched his tired face. Alice made it clear that no one here had a choice, and everything would be exactly as she wanted. Next, it was necessary to play the role, act strictly according to the plan, and outplay the experienced vampire. The player said he would give her something sweeter than blood, and there was no humor in his voice. For a normal vampire, there is nothing more important than blood, but not for Alice von Ataraxia. She had long dreamed of freedom, and Alex knew how to press on her weak and sore spot. All the vampires immediately screamed and hissed like poisonous snakes, wanting to shut up the impudent boy. They were already introducing a blender and smoothies, as if they were filming a horror version of MasterChef. But the boss turned off this casting call for culinary maniacs with one glance. Alice became interested in his words and said that she was ready to listen to the self-confident chick. After this, Alex took a mask out of his pocket and declared that he was a representative of the main association. He promised to fulfill his destiny and free her from eternal imprisonment in this dungeon. Let's start with the fact that a main is someone who, because of money, revenge, or personal beliefs, has turned away from people. The mains hindered players' progress through the tower and directly aided the monsters lurking in the labyrinths. Alice had heard about this organization many times before and immediately showed a keen interest in it. Alex claimed to have established contact with the temple on the 27th floor and learned too many of the tower's secrets. Teresa was silent and listened attentively, trying to understand whether this was the truth or a brazen and dangerous lie. The people around them became visibly agitated upon hearing about the temple, as if the player had found their weak spot. If he really knew about the temple, then it no longer looked like a bluff, although words alone were still not enough to trust him. To Alice, all this sounded like empty chatter, because she couldn't stand being led by the nose by the chicks from the human world. Her blood sphere activated, and it seemed that only a miracle could save the player from certain death. He stood still and waited for countless weapons to pierce his body and send him to the graveyard of history. It was at that moment that Teresa took her first step, unable to watch her ally be killed so easily. The paladin activated her angel power technique and, in an instant, snatched the man from the clutches of death. To do this, Teresa had to spend most of her resources, but she did not regret it for a second. Whatever happened next, she remained true to her principles, her code, and her own conscience. The dungeon lord only mocked her self-confidence and naive determination. The paladin had to give it his all to hold back even a simple vampire attack. The laughter died away, and Alice remembered how much she hated everything connected with holy power. The jokes were over, and she decided to destroy the paladin with one blow, activating a blood tornado. Teresa didn't know when the mana would run out, but she didn't care, because she was ready to die to save humanity. These words turned out to be prophetic. Just a second later, a merciless sword pierced her heart. It happened so suddenly and cruelly that the trembling girl immediately burst into tears. She turned around and realized that the man she had already considered a friend had cold-bloodedly betrayed her. Even Alice didn't expect such a turn of events, and stopped the bloody tornado for a moment. With these actions, Alex finally proved that he was not bluffing, and had come from the very beginning to free the vampire. With her last strength, Teresa tried to grab his leg and look into the scoundrel's eyes. They promised to save the squad members, and she hoped that at least in this he would not deceive her. In response, she saw only a rude look filled with cold hatred. Then Alex calmly raised the dagger and spattered Teresa's blood all over the luxurious carpet in pure Hollywood style. Now Alice finally believed him and even became truly interested in this guy. She was ready to listen to him and find out exactly how he was going to remove the spell and free her essence. To do this, you will need the Ring of Brahman, which is capable of containing any soul in the universe. After moving the soul, you can trick the barrier, take it outside the dungeon, and free it forever. It was for this moment that Alex gave up all the experience points he had earned. He fought the Minotaur for so long and so hard, only to waste it all on one single skill. This technique is called Soul Transfer, and only a level 1 player can activate it. Just now, he finally did it, and a magic circle appeared out of nowhere. Only once a year can you seal the soul of another being. Was that moment really worth it? Now Alice had to decide what to do next. Stay in the dungeon or risk everything. She reached the edge of her own life and stopped listening to the stupid hints of other vampires. For a true aristocrat, imprisonment in a dungeon was akin to slow and merciless torture. She hated this place, and for many years she dreamed of getting out of here at any cost. Just in case, she warned her assistant, if anything goes wrong, he must destroy the player. After this, Alice slowly descended from the throne and approached the magic circle. Her curvaceous figure and beautiful hair swayed in the light wind of freedom, clouding her mind and dulling her intuition. Alex promised that she would never regret it. She just had to touch his hand. Once this happened, Alice von Ataraxia officially gave permission for her soul to be transferred into the Ring of Brahman. She felt her body dissolving into space and her strength gradually leaving her. Once inside the ring, she felt a strange comfort, as if there was more space there than in the dungeon. It seemed she still hadn't realized that she was trapped, and that this was now her new home. Immediately after this, the heavenly patronage skill was activated, and the paladin rose from the dead. Alex took off his mask, smiled, and congratulated his friend on her return. She responded in kind, although only now did she realize that everything that had happened had been part of a plan from the very beginning. The players didn't have a second to relax because immediately after Alice's order, the vampires rushed into attack. She needed to free herself from the devil's ring as quickly as possible, at any cost and without delay. Her chief assistant, Bellis, immediately carried out the order and activated the blood wave without hesitation. It was a level 13 skill that had previously allowed him to take entire guild squads hostage. The wave of blood came in a solid wall, and Alex immediately realized that the standard defense simply wouldn't hold up. He instantly chose fire as the perfect answer and summoned the Phoenix Flame without wasting any time. Teresa immediately joined the fight and rushed to free the rest of the team. They needed to urgently find a way out while the main character alone held back the onslaught of vampires. The blood wave was stopped, although up to this point Bellis's technology had never failed. The vampires lost their rhythm. Their movements became jerky. Without the Lord, they no longer controlled the battlefield. Now, it's noticeably easier to finish off these ballet slugs, especially for those who have already played this game. Alex activated the unique ability of the Sword Graveyard, preparing to respond to the dark martial art. Despite everything, the vampires still rushed forward, feeling like masters of their native walls. What happened next was something that many people later couldn't really describe, calling it pure fantasy. No one understood how an ordinary person was able to destroy practically immortal vampires. Teresa looked at him without taking her eyes off him. Admiration and support mixed in her eyes. Despite the death he had experienced, the task was completed and Alex kept his word to her. Teresa sank to her knees and covered her face with her hands, her body shaking and her breathing uneven. He saved her life, which meant the conditions of the copying were fulfilled, and the patronage of the heavens passed under his control. This skill allows one to avoid death through divine protection, which is how Teresa once saved Europe. Now it was possible to take the precious relics and return home as quickly as possible. Squad leader Ken also expressed interest in the relics and stated that he wanted to participate in the distribution of profits. Justice was unknown to him, and for such greed he should have been punished, like some presidents. Alex didn't resist and calmly gave him all the relics while Teresa tried to understand his plan. The happy leader immediately rushed towards the golden objects, imagining the future income in advance. He spotted a fragment of Merlin's staff and had already seen millions of dollars on the black market. But as soon as he touched the artifact, a dark curse sank into his blood. Wealth beckoned beautifully, and retribution came without delay. There was a mark left on his hand that could not be washed off or erased with ordinary water. If Lord Alice disappeared completely, the curse would be lifted, but the vampire would still be alive. Teresa froze, looking at Ken, realizing for the first time that greed was more dangerous here than any monster. Alex briefly advised her not to linger and to leave before everything spoiled the mood. Meanwhile, in Seoul, a large crowd of people had already gathered at the entrance to the tower. The Awakened Association sent a manager, the young and overly energetic Christina. The head of the new players department, Mr. Brown, was shifting nervously nearby. The raid participants should have left the portal long ago, but it remained empty. Soon the stalker contacted and reported that the capture of the ruins was nearing completion. When hope was almost extinguished, the system announced, the abode of the fallen was finally cleared. The portal opened and wounded and exhausted players emerged, barely able to stand on their feet. Frozen and hungry, they looked as if they had been through fire, water, the abyss, and hell. The journalists rushed to ask questions, but immediately froze, their mouths open at what they saw. The group's leader, Ken, stood there, hairless and speechless, afraid to even breathe. Teresa then appeared and stated that the ruins had not been cleared by the guild squad at all. She said that the Phantom did everything alone, while the others just watched what was happening. Representatives of the association were already preparing to call management, informing them of the emergence of a new superstar. Cedric realized that his plan had failed and almost swallowed his tongue in horror. After this, the exhausted players went home, finally getting some well-deserved rest. The next morning, the news was full of speculation about the identity of the man nicknamed the Phantom. Alex was pleased to see this resonance, although public attention had not previously interested him. The climb up the tower was becoming increasingly difficult, and he clearly understood that it was time to take a break and recover. Only Teresa knew his true face, and it was to her that he entrusted this secret, and she promised to keep it at any cost. Now it's time to talk to the locked vampire and finally gain a potentially powerful ally. Alice still couldn't come to terms with the fact that she had become a slave and was forced to obey the orders of her new master. At first, she refused to talk, so I had to shake the ring slightly to convince her to change her mind. At such moments, Alex became ruthless, because he needed to agree to cooperation at any cost. A few hours later, he finally freed Alice to personally announce to her the new rules of this game. Having broken out, she immediately thought of the long-awaited revenge, clenched her fists and prepared to shed blood. The problem was that her size had changed, and she now looked like an actress from the movie The Hobbit. For a great vampire from an ancient aristocratic family, this was a blow below the belt. Now she could only use 1% of her power, and had no right to direct it against her master. Alice was depressed and even burst into tears, and at that moment you really felt sorry for her. For many years she dreamed of freedom, but reality turned out to be completely different from her fantasies. Alex had no intention of being a bloodthirsty tyrant or despot, and was willing to give her relative freedom. If Alice von Ataraxia helps him achieve his goals, he promises to destroy those who betrayed her many years ago. He even promised to bring her home and make her the head of the Ataraxia clan again, restoring her lost name. As a result, the raid, which was initially expected to fail, received an unexpected ending thanks to a mysterious player. This incident was discussed online by everyone and their dog, who admired the talent and audacity of the new hero. He was dubbed the country's new hero, and the strongest guilds were already looking forward to the fight for the right to get him. At the same time, the main character did not forget that during the raid, the Dark Raven Guild tried to destroy him. That's why he took a little rest, and the next morning he came straight to their main office. He did not want to interfere in the affairs of the guilds or their internal squabbles, but revenge was necessary. The Phantom had no intention of forgiving anyone, and burst into their party without warning. A huge crowd of guards prepared to smash his devilish mask and break all his bones. They didn't realize that this guy was on a whole other level, and they went forward with false confidence. At this time, the guild boss, Mr. Gregory, was scolding his subordinate for a failed mission. Their team was rapidly losing its reputation, and was in danger of disappearing from the arena altogether. Suddenly, an explosion thundered in the corridor, and all of the boss's plans instantly faded into the background. The masked guy swept away everyone in his path and soon reached the final floor. Cedric, who had just been humiliated, saw a chance to regain face in the eyes of his boss. He failed the mission and lost his reputation, but he believed that everything would be forgotten if he killed the masked man. Cedric pulled out his knife and lunged forward, intending to slit the throat of the one who had ruined his life. Alex calmly removed his mask and greeted his old acquaintance without emotion. While Cedric was trying to comprehend what was happening, a hard blow knocked out several of his teeth. After this, Phantom confidently sat down in the guest chair and declared that he was now in command here. The boss could not bear such humiliation because he was proud of his samurai roots and ancient lineage. His ancestors had killed their enemies without hesitation for such insults, so Gregory had no doubts. He pulled out a family heirloom, looked closely at his opponent, and prepared to strike at his heart. But sometimes even cold calculation doesn't work against a higher-level predator. With one blow, Alex broke the family heirloom and made it clear that today everything would be different. From that moment on, a conversation began that would forever change the fate of the Black Raven Guild. For everything they did against Alex and the regular players during the raid, the guild should have disappeared. Realizing this, the boss began offering crazy amounts of money and even family heirlooms. He hinted that his death would set off a chain of bloody reprisals and endless revenge. Too many will want revenge, and Alex will have to drown in a world of blood and violence. There was logic in these words, but Phantom was so angry that he was ready to go all the way. He struck with a blast of magical light, and for a moment, Mr. Gregory felt like a bird. The body flew from the top floor and fell with a dull thud onto the roof of its own car. The guild was left without a boss, and now it was time to decide what to do with it next. Cedric only survived because his sister worked for Alex, and he didn't want to upset her. The local security guard pretended to be dead for a long time, and then got up as if nothing had happened. If he can prove his worth right now, he will get a second chance, and with it, the right to save his life. His name is Kim. He is 26 years old, and until this day he has been doing the most ordinary work within the guild. He studied at a good university, but after the world changed, he still hadn't found himself until fate brought him here. The situation was dire. The Black Raven Guild was facing serious changes, and everyone would have to show flexibility. The guy who had nothing could right now become the new boss, a rare social elevator that only works in times of disaster. Alex was ready to give him the manager's position without any unnecessary emotions, because someone still had to do the dirty and boring work. If a rank-and-file member suddenly gains a high position, the others will inevitably be against him and try to overthrow him. To prevent this from happening, Alex knew perfectly well what to do, especially since he had a friend nearby who wanted to have a little fun. Very soon, all representatives of the Black Raven Guild received an urgent message. They were asked to immediately gather on the top floor of the base to hear an important update. Even the highest-ranking players, who had been silently following orders all this time, received an invitation. The assembled players were initially stunned by the sight of the guild office. The local boss who hired them was lying on the roof of his own car, choking on blood. Almost all the guards were destroyed, and the guild building looked more like ruins after an assault. Having reached the top floor, one could see that the boss's chair was now occupied by an ordinary security guard, Kim. Many high-level players immediately decided that this was a riot and that order needed to be restored immediately. Kim alone could not stop such people. He urgently needed support. Behind him stood a girl, calmly, not moving from her place even when dozens of pairs of eyes were staring at her. She coldly stated that there was a new owner now, and anyone who broke the rules would go to hell. Alice von Ataraxia didn't come here for jokes, especially since she hadn't drunk anyone's blood for too long. At first, her words were not given any importance, since the players were not used to listening to a little girl. From the outside, she looked like she had just skipped class and was afraid her parents would find out. But despite her height and appearance, no one would dare to test the strength of this devilish woman. Alice raised her hand, and a second later the office shook with an explosion, as if the building itself refused to continue the argument. Alex was downstairs at the time, watching the educational process with cold pleasure, a kind of management without HR. Having finished all his business, he received a system notification about the start of the second association test. More than 2.5 months have passed unnoticed since the test tower appeared. The world was changing at an alarming rate, and people had to adapt, even if they didn't want to. The news increasingly featured a masked man who attracted attention because he single-handedly cleared deadly places. To most, he remained an ordinary player, while the Phantom continued to live in the shadows. Without wasting any time, Alex headed to the Awakened Association to move on to the next phase of the plan. He was no longer going to hide in the shadows, for now was the time to assert his power. But there was no need to rush. It was necessary to act smoothly, calmly, and prudently. Alex received his Awakened Player ID and could now officially participate in raids. His closest friends, who did not yet know that the man in the mask was him, gathered there. Alex introduced Alice to them, saying she was a player from Northern Europe who had come to experience a new culture. He also introduced them to a new member of the team, Kim, who looked like a teenager who had suddenly been given too much power. Until recently, this guy was exploited and humiliated. But now he has found friends and become the head of the guild. For Kim, this day was special because his life changed radically and irrevocably. While Mark and Jessica were talking to Kim, a rare window of opportunity opened up for Alex. He didn't like what Alice had done in the guild office and decided to give her a dressing down. She justified herself by saying that she didn't want to go to extremes, but people constantly create problems themselves. Soon the meeting with friends came to an end, and it was necessary to decide what to do next. The third floor was cleared, but the fourth was not yet open, which meant it was time for training and hunting. The best dungeons were already under the control of the guilds, and everyone was sure that there were no free places left. Only Phantom knew that there was another dungeon that could provide invaluable progress. On the first floor of the tower was the Moon Lake, famous for its tranquil and beautiful scenery. Almost no one came here, although it was here that a newcomer could take a serious step forward. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and few thought about simply stopping and looking around. There were 12 graceful statues around the lake, but only one of them had a special function. There are only 3 players in the entire world who have discovered this secret, and you won't find a single line about it on the internet. No one was ever able to find the correct key to the statue, as only Alex ever managed to complete the game. In fact, everything is decided by the moonlight, the position of the fingers, and a precisely calculated angle of reflection. Once the system begins to react to light, all that remains is to say a few simple but precise words. After this, a passage to the lower floors opens, because the tower always loves riddles and unpleasant surprises. Many believe that the path only leads up, but the wise know that sometimes, in order to ascend, you first need to descend. As Alice walked through the dungeon, she gradually felt freer than before. Although she now has an owner, she can visit different places and perform real tasks. From the outside, it was noticeable that she was even a little happy about the contract with the man. She couldn't admit it. After all, she was an aristocrat from a line of high vampires. Having descended deeper, the player immediately activated the skill Frozen Tears and increased his stats. Seizing the opportunity, he decided to talk to Alice and find out what was on her mind. She had been alive for over 1,000 years, and Alex wondered if she considered herself part of this game. As soon as the question was uttered, the silent mode was activated and he almost disappeared from this world. The screen went dark, the skills went silent, and the system made it clear that such questions were not to be asked here. Now is not the time to think about the creator because monsters are already moving in the shadows. Here again, the flame of the phoenix will be needed. Otherwise, the darkness simply will not let go back. Enormous scarab beetles came crawling from all sides, and the battle immediately became a fight to the death. It was moments like these that made it worth going down into the dungeon. Only in such conditions does a player go beyond his limits and reveal his true potential. The endless stream of monsters from the abyss is enough to frighten even the higher vampires. It was strange to see Alice von Ataraxia afraid of bugs, even though she should be fearless. Finding himself in a dense encirclement, the player immediately activated the patronage of the heavens. The next attack came like a hurricane, almost like a kiss from Zeus from the sky. Alex had never felt so powerful before, and his connection with Teresa took on new colors. Alice decided not to stand aside and show what she was really capable of. Blood chains of unknown magnitude squeezed the scarabs, causing them to squeal like chicks. For several hours, the two destroyed monsters without stopping. The battle was like a fight with an endless army that knew no fatigue. Only a madman would return here again, and it seemed the protagonist fit that description perfectly. Alex didn't slow down even when his body demanded a stop. This was how he always prepared for the tower. While Alex was going crazy in the dungeon, the true titans of the world gathered in the meeting room of the Olympus Guild. After the changes, it is the awakened players who rule the roost and solve problems faster than governments and presidents, without promises or unnecessary words. Titan Guild leader Fred is worried that the 8th raid on the 4th floor has failed again. Of the 100 strongest, Only 15 returned home, and they all looked like zombies, barely able to stand on their feet. The third floor's strange boss summons thousands of stone statues, and no one knows how to fight it. To get to the fourth floor, we had to come up with something new, and that's why we started the conversation. The head of the Chinese guild, Mr. Felix, did not offer any solutions, and was only angry about the loss of the divine artifact. Maria, the leader of Olympus, tried to calm everyone down, explaining that players needed more time to level up. The leader of the third squad of the Tangoon Guild, Mr. Charles, fully supported her position. He believed that the problem lay with the Chinese guild, which monopolized the best dungeons. If the Chinese shared dungeons and helped others progress, the fourth floor would have been taken long ago. Because of this, conflicts constantly broke out between the two sides. Everyone was tired of mutual reproaches, and for a while even forgot why they had gathered. But there was still one important problem that could not be ignored. The day before, an unexpected message arrived from representatives of the main clan. Their conditions promised support, but everything turned out to be much more complicated than it looked on paper. No one wanted to get involved with those who were on the international wanted list and risk their reputation. Even Teresa understood perfectly well why collaborating with bandits was a bad idea. Now that the influence of the guilds exceeded the power of governments, moral character began to play a decisive role. Mains are often called worthless, and while this sounds kind, the criminals themselves hate this kind of treatment. The head of this criminal organization appeared straight out of the fire and immediately reminded them that without his support, they would not be able to cope with anything. He came unannounced, and this clearly did not please the people who considered the conversation closed and confidential. Furious and merciless, Charles instantly turned red with anger, clenched his fists, and rushed forward like an enraged tiger. For the first time in a long time, Felix completely agreed with him, grabbed his sword, and also prepared for battle. These hotheads didn't even try to understand that the old man came not with a threat, but with an offer. He wanted them to help his clan, and in return he promised a solution to the main problem: the boss of the third floor. To prove his point and demonstrate his strength, the old man activated the Black Cemetery Guardian skill. The ground on the street began to move, and the dead, long buried in this area, began to rise from under the asphalt. This skill allows you to grow your army almost infinitely, like TikTok followers if you don't care whether they're alive or not. All this was made possible by the Staff of Greed, assembled from 99 different artifacts. Even the most hot-tempered admitted that with such strength, the boss of the third floor could be defeated. At least in the trailer it would look convincing. On the one hand, the old man could have been killed right now and gotten rid of yet another criminal group. But on the other hand, if the agreement remains in the shadows, the guilds may receive something much more valuable. Climbing to the fourth floor was the dream of absolutely all the strongest players in the New World. Only Teresa looked frightened and hesitant, because the thought of collaborating with bandits did not fit into her head. She felt that if Alex had been there, nothing like this would have happened here. As soon as this thought flashed through her mind, a request for a video call came from that very guy. He said hello and pretended to just want to see how Teresa was doing. The girl made it clear that the situation was difficult and she didn't know what to do next. Alex's voice attracted the necromancer's attention, and he demanded to see his face since he had intervened in the conversation. The phantom did not refuse, put on a mask, and joined the conversation with all participants in the negotiations. He was instantly recognized. It was the same guy who had cleared the first-floor dungeon alone. No one knew who he really was, but it was already clear. The largest guilds in the world wanted to get their hands on him. Now this super newcomer stood before the most powerful bosses on the planet, even though no one had even invited him. Many people's mouths were dry from excitement and joy at such an unexpected appearance. Even the head of Manhwa had heard of him and knew that this guy's talent went far beyond the ordinary. Alex was quickly explained the essence of the negotiations, and even shown the army of undead standing in the backyard. In response, he just laughed and said that no one could defeat the boss using a fake staff. One glance from an experienced player was enough to understand. The relic was created without two key artifacts. Such a staff will never reveal its full power without a holy heart and a prison uniform anointed with oil. The real Staff of Greed should have a red stone under the skull, which is not yet found on the open floors of the tower. The main proof was the weakness of the undead. These soldiers would not last even a quarter of a day in the boss's room. At a critical moment, the necromancer will abandon his allies and run away with his tail between his legs, like a frightened coyote. This typical swindler did not inspire any respect from Phantom, so he said everything straight to his face. The old man, of course, became angry and promised that the guilds would greatly regret their refusal. He declared that the next time they met, everything would be different, and immediately disappeared. The same thing happened to his army of the undead, which dissolved as if after Thanos' snap, only without the music and fan applause. The plan, which seemed almost perfect, failed miserably, and the bosses were once again left without a solution. The Phantom offered a solution. Leave the third floor to him and refuse to cooperate with the criminals. He promised to clear the floor single-handedly and guarantee results. Unlike the MANHUA deal, there were almost no downsides here, and all parties came out on top. The guild leaders happily agreed and even promised to fully finance Phantom. They expected to go with him, but in reality, he was going to go there alone. He didn't need a reward. He just asked not to interfere with him doing what he does best. A logical question arose. Why does he need all this and what is the benefit? A question that is usually asked too late. Alex paused briefly, then calmly replied that he was doing this for someone important to him. This was a clear hint at Teresa, who clearly did not expect to hear this. Alex hated adding pathos, but sometimes you have to lie to hide your true motives. His words had the effect of a bomb exploding. Everyone was satisfied and accepted the terms without objection. He will receive something far more valuable than any beautiful artifacts and golden relics. Because of the conversation, Alex completely forgot that he was still in the dungeon and continued to fight monsters. While he was distracted, Alice almost died and immediately accused her owner of not thinking about her at all. She should shut up and accept the reality. She is now a slave, and her opinion matters little to anyone. To make amends, Alex offered to restore her mana as a gift. Alice immediately made it clear that she was not interested in this at all. To replenish her energy, she prefers another, much more reliable method, simply drinking blood. No matter what Alex said, it didn't work. And in the end, Alice von Ataraxia got what she wanted. Alice pulled away, satisfied, and Alex leaned against the wall for a second, feeling the world float slightly. Having finished his business in the dungeon, Phantom acquired several new items and prepared for the next stage of his life. Taking Alice with him, he jumped into an unknown hole which many call the Abyss. During his time playing, he had come down here more than 100 times and understood perfectly well how everything was arranged here. Using the element of fire, he illuminated the abyss, looked around, and suddenly felt at home. Ahead stood a huge statue with glowing eyes, one glance of which would have been enough to frighten the dead. Nevertheless, Alex looked at her as if she were an old acquaintance he hadn't seen for a long time. He greeted Anubis calmly, as if he were not the god of Egypt but an ordinary yard dog. Anubis greeted the first man who dared to descend here. He was in no hurry to kill the guest and first wanted to have some fun, typical behavior of a boss confident in his superiority. Alice was scared and tried to protect her owner, although she would never have risked her life for a person before. Alex asked her to calm down and made it clear that he was in complete control of the situation. He was going to show Alice von Ataraxia who exactly she had made a contract with, and who she now called master. Such self-confidence angered Anubis, and he immediately activated his personal ability, Death's Judgment. To copy this skill, one must destroy the incarnation of Anubis, his seat of consciousness, and anger the god. He always uses this ability against enemies, and any mistake in the response triggers an absolute judgment. Alex needed this skill to be able to ask questions and kill enemies without protracted battles. Time stretched out into an endless series of questions, where every wrong answer would cost one's head. Alex answered with utmost honesty, despite the pressure from countless monsters. One mistake would have been enough to kill him, but not a muscle on his face moved. One swing of his sword was enough for him to cut down any monster that dared to challenge him. Anubis couldn't interfere. The answers were honest and the monsters weren't up to the task. Alice, watching the owner, increasingly realized that she had entered into a contract with the right person. The Phantom openly mocked Anubis, gradually unsettling him. Eventually, God lost his temper and openly challenged man, completely losing control. This devilish dog had never been in a situation where he was perceived as entertainment. He unleashed all the monsters on the man, hoping to crush the insolent brat with numbers. In response, Alex activated the daylight skill, and the darkness instantly dissipated. He then had to fight a special monster known as the Oblivion Bee. These creatures kill with a single touch, condemning their victim to a painful death. You can only fight them at a long distance, and under no circumstances should you let them get too close. Alex did a perfect job using the ice threat technique. Anubis repeated the same tactics over and over again, relying on the monsters he had at his disposal. The player quickly learned all the repetitive elements and began fighting almost with his eyes closed. Gradually, he improved his stats, earned points, and spent them on power-up pills. Even before descending into the dungeon, Alex prepared the necessary items for the unification. When the situation reached its breaking point, Anubis finally realized what was happening. He considered himself a puppeteer, but he turned out to be just a puppet in the hands of a master. The Phantom had been provoking him from the very beginning in order to fulfill the skill-copying conditions. The court of Anubis now belonged to the Phantom, and the statue of the god lost its meaning. From now on, Alex can ask any 3 questions, after which the enemy's stats are halved for several minutes. The skill can only be used on one person once. Otherwise, the Egyptian gods will severely punish for insolence. The Phantom felt the gazes of others on him, as if one of the gods had already made a mark on his personal list of goals and put a check mark. Now he didn't want to think about it and wanted to end his stay in the abyss as quickly as possible before this attention turned into problems. But first, he had to answer an unexpected call from the stalker, who looked more serious than ever and spoke without his usual jokes. In 24 hours, the Awakened Association will begin a martial arts tournament, inviting the strongest players in Korea without exception. It seems that there are things far more important to the association than the fate of the third-floor boss and the nerves of ordinary players. Leonard personally invites Alex to take part in the tournament and fight him one more time, as if settling an old debt. Of course, the protagonist was not interested in this until he found out what exactly he was being offered in exchange for his participation. If he defeats Leonard, he will receive a pass to the black market, and at that moment, the rules of the game completely change. To begin with, it's worth explaining what the black market is, and why an invitation there is considered a rare stroke of luck. The black market is a secret place where invited members can purchase special items exclusively for real money. To defeat the third-floor boss, unique items are required, so Phantom will still have to accept the imposed conditions. At the same time, he is gradually developing his personal brand and posting videos of himself, without hiding the results. His fan base is growing as rapidly as the interest in him from the largest guilds. People attribute godlike powers to Phantom, and even say that he is the son of Zeus, a standard upgrade for any hero after a couple of viral videos. The fans whispered and argued among themselves because No one understood how he was even going to go there alone. Thanks to the huge number of views, Alex guarantees himself a solid and stable income. Now that money is no longer a problem, all that remains is to obtain official permission to enter the black market. This is precisely why he came to that very tournament, to fight the swordsman from the past again. The organizers selected only 24 high-level players here, without any random names. After the failed raids of the third floor, the population began to lose faith in success and increasingly doubt the future. The government decided to hold a tournament, film it, and show people what the awakened are capable of. Almost like UFC, only without rules and with a real death toll. Among the best players here, you can meet old acquaintances whom the main character has already defeated before. Here is not only the old fiery phoenix Gilbert, but also little Samantha, who has made a huge leap in development since the last time we met. Guild representatives have already taken notice of them and are seriously looking to recruit them into their teams. There's even a black luck guild boss here, an arrogant and extremely unpleasant slug named Juan. He came here to carefully observe the talented swordsman Leonardo and assess his potential. This guy has excellent control over the battle, a wide field of view, high speed, and an impressive arsenal of attacks. He was the first to refuse to join the guild, which only further piqued the boss's interest. But not everyone is interested in Stalker joining the ranks of the Black Fortune Guild. Local superstar John is confident that no one can match his attacking abilities. His loud and provocative behavior constantly irritates his boss, who has already asked him to shut up more than once. This guy has every chance of reaching S rank in just a few years, if he finally stops being lazy and distracted. Juan hopes to develop a rising star, so he regularly attends such tournaments and keeps an eye out for new talent. During the battle, almost no one could compete with Leonardo. It looked like the audience was shown a trailer for the final boss. The swordsman himself was excited and motivated, although for him what was happening seemed like just a warm-up. He was preparing for his main battle, and winning the tournament did not mean that much to him. According to the rules, the winners have the right to choose any opponent for a friendly sparring match. Leo confidently pointed to the podium, where many famous and influential people were present. John was sure that the choice would fall on him, and he clapped his hands joyfully, not hiding his smugness. In fact, the swordsman chose not him at all, but a completely different, unexpected guy. A little higher up sat a man whose name was known only to a few and did not cause a stir. He stood up calmly while analysts panicked and tried to figure out who this guy really was. The association's register stated that he was just an average player who was, supposedly, incapable of anything. The crowd froze. The champion had just chosen an opponent who shouldn't have been there at all. While everyone watched in amazement, Juan sensed that something was not going according to plan. He realized that this weakling was not as simple as he seemed, and now a real bloody meat grinder was about to begin. The spectators didn't expect anything supernatural, but once the battle began, no one could look away. Long months of training, and here it is, the long-awaited chance to prove your superiority. Leonard used the sword soul technique, while Alex called upon the Phoenix Flame to help. Everything seemed calm in the city's main arena, and many spectators had no idea what kind of fight was unfolding before their eyes. This continued until the two supernatural players came face to face, and then it seemed that even the dead beneath the arena woke up. The Battle of Legends was ready to penetrate the stratosphere, as both fighters were burning with an incredible desire to win and had no intention of giving in. Leonard never understood where his opponent got so many skills and hidden techniques. He ended up losing consciousness and falling face down, losing the fight of his life, only without the post-credits scene. The black market pass changed hands, and this event significantly accelerated the further development of the story. The spectators still couldn't figure out who this guy was and why he had just defeated the tournament champion. Finally, Alex decided to approach his old friends to find out how far their progress had gone. Their first meeting in the past was too cruel, although under different circumstances they could have become friends. One of the spectators could not calmly watch what was happening. Anger, pride, and a feeling of humiliation were seething within him. Guys like John always consider themselves the main stars of the scene and are not capable of letting anyone steal their thunder. He was now at the peak of his development, all thanks to the skill known as the Giant's Hand. Alex had seen this skill before and knew that it only took one wrong move from John to copy his technique. At first, John pretended that he did not intend to fight and offered something vaguely resembling friendship. He extended his hand as if welcoming a newcomer into the dark and cruel world of strong players. Behind that calm expression hid dark feelings, anger, rage, and poorly restrained hatred. This was just what the reporters were waiting for, as was the head of the Black Fortune Guild who was closely watching the scene. John clearly wanted to steal all the limelight by defeating the man who had already captured everyone's attention. Alex easily recognized his hidden intention and instantly received the Giant's Hand skill. This skill greatly increased the strength of one's grip and allowed one to lift objects whose weight was tens of times greater than one's own. Even in the game, Alex dreamed of getting this ability many times, but nothing ever came of it before. Now he finally got what he had long considered his own, and he felt as if he had grabbed luck by the tail. As their hands intertwined like snakes, John was already preparing to humiliate another newcomer in front of the audience. He laughed loudly and felt the reporters eagerly photographing his triumph. John could already see the headlines and his own merch. A few seconds passed, but nothing happened, and his skill seemed to simply evaporate. The reason was simple. Alex activated Anubis's judgment and sharply lowered the opponent's stats. Now he was stronger, and the people who had gathered for John's triumph witnessed his public failure. John screamed and called for help, forgetting about his image, pride, and superstar status. At the same time, the arrogant newcomer laughed and didn't even try to hide that he liked it. After a short period of bullying, it was time for boxing, and even here Alex was head and shoulders above. One precise blow to the body was enough to send John into a fit of foaming at the mouth. It would seem that this is where it all should end, but it was still too early for Alex to say goodbye to the public. The Black Fortune Guild boss was no longer going to tolerate insults and prepared to engage in battle. He had lost a young talent named Leonard, and now his main star was being beaten in front of a crowd. To wash away this stain on his reputation, he was ready to tear the guy apart using the blood rage technique. Juan rushed forward, outstripping his own scarlet aura, as if he had lost the last of his composure. To somehow stop this, it was necessary to immediately activate the daylight technology. After this, a magic blade appeared in Phantom's hand, and his stats instantly skyrocketed. The difference in levels had noticeably narrowed, but even now Juan had no intention of retreating even a single step. During the second-floor boss raid, Divine Warrior, Huang was the vanguard leader and led the strongest players. And now, he couldn't believe that some average guy dared to challenge him right in front of the crowd. The battle was confidently heading towards a bloody denouement, until he unexpectedly intervened in the situation. The head of the Awakened Association, James, along with his assistants, stopped this madness. Thus, the first personal meeting between Phantom and the leader of the association took place. Juan tried to complain to his old friend and convince him that the young man needed to be punished. James calmly ignored the request and said that this was a tournament, not a show. There were enough clowns here without additional casting. After this, the head of the association introduced himself to the young talent and tried to make a good impression on him. To be honest, just 20 minutes ago, he didn't even know about Alex's existence. Then the director in charge of the tournament urgently contacted him and informed him that something incredible was happening in the arena. After learning how strong Alex was, The association boss personally came to congratulate him on achieving the 16th S rank in Korea. It turned out that the association had previously made a mistake in its assessment, and now the head of the department has officially apologized to the player for the incorrect rank. While the spectators screamed and filmed everything on their phones, the journalists went crazy, as if it were the final of the Squid Game, only here the stakes were real. At the same time, no one cared about the unconscious John and his boss from the Black Luck Guild, who remained behind the scenes of the triumph. For these people, the tournament was supposed to be a stage for strengthening their legacy and power, because they had prepared for it for too long and carefully. As a result, Mr. Huang was left with nothing and, on top of that, was publicly disgraced right in front of the crowd. At the same time, Alex was basking in the glory that he earned not with beautiful words but with pure strength. He fulfilled the conditions of all the skills and acquired the energy of blood rage, which, until recently, belonged to Juan. The internet exploded with news about this guy, and comments rained down like meteorites in spiral galaxies, keeping people awake. Alex recalled the events of the tournament and felt that this world was specially created for his style of play. When he said he was going to Las Vegas, the association gave him a private plane without any questions. Now, being in the salon, he tried to believe that everything that was happening was not someone's joke or another dream. He started from scratch, barely able to find money for food and rent, and now he has become a national treasure. It was a pleasant feeling to realize one's own success. First-class food, a comfortable seat, and a confident outlook on the future. Alice, as usual, decided to ruin everything and immediately after her appearance alerted the owner. She pointed to the guy in front and said that he had a very strange, unpleasant smell coming from him. Usually, people have a neutral or even pleasant smell of blood, but for this person, it was the opposite. I didn't even want to taste it, but Alice is a vampire and she especially loves sweet boys. Alex had to use the window of truth to figure out who this guy really was and what abilities he had. It turned out that his name was Michael Zudro, a 24-year-old necromancer who could resurrect the dead. If you get close to such a person, you can gain his skill or even join the Main's association. Walking past Alex, Michael noticed the new Korean star and decided to start a conversation. Of course, this meeting was not accidental. He was initially on this plane to establish contact. Alex smiled back, just like people who have already read your part to the end smile. They quickly became acquainted, and Michael even offered to get a drink to help them relax a little during the flight. He gave the impression of being a pleasant and sociable guy with a broad outlook and impeccable manners. Michael said he owns a cosmetics business that began to struggle after the tower went up. This story was clearly memorized in advance, and he didn't even suspect that Alex already knew who was in front of him. Michael then admitted that he wanted to expand the business and start working with awakened players. He was especially interested in the man in the mask, who was now being talked about even by ordinary people. His team was also planning a raid on the third floor until news about the Phantom came through. A mysterious masked loner decided to act on his own, thus disrupting many of Michael Judro's plans. However, he still wanted to go to the third floor with his team and called Alex to join him. According to him, the team is fully funded, and the chances of success look more than tempting. It was a clever tactic. Otherwise, the big guilds would have simply blocked the entrance and prevented Phantom from being disturbed. To convince his interlocutor, Michael was ready to spend a lot of money and show his trump cards. He had an elixir that could cure any fatal disease. This drug could even restart a stopped heart, and its real cost was difficult to imagine. It was hard to imagine what the main association had to do to obtain such a rarity. Michael didn't just offer the elixir, but gave it as an advance, asking in return only to activate the contract. The dead man's contract technique was ready to bind Alex with the bonds of death right now. If the terms were broken, the curse would last for life, more severe than any terms of service which everyone accepts without reading. Michael, having come to his senses, tried to take the elixir back, but he was no longer able to do so. Alex acted like a school bully. He took what he needed and didn't give anything in return. Both players froze tensely, and at that moment the plane entered a zone of turbulence. Alex calmly said goodbye and returned to his seat, while the captain asked the passengers to remain calm. Michael tried to stop him and threatened that his influential friends would definitely take revenge for this act. It was then that Phantom said everything he knew, and in a matter of seconds he had Michael out of his mind. He made it clear that he knew about his work with the main association and his long-standing conflict with Phantom. At this point, the conversation ended as if it had never happened. Once in Las Vegas, Alex immediately headed to the city's central area. This was not a random impulse. He flew here specifically for the big and dangerous game. The guy wasn't crazy and wasn't going to waste money mindlessly. He acted prudently, calmly, and with a clear understanding of the goal. As a token of gratitude for Alice noticing the necromancer in time, the owner took her with him, not leaving her alone even for a minute. It is in Las Vegas that the Black Auction is located, where you can get truly special and dangerous gifts. At first glance, the private mountain house Tortuga seems like just another elite gambling establishment for the rich. In reality, things are not as smooth as they seem from the outside, especially for players who lose too much money. Such people can be thrown out into the street without further ado, or even brutally beaten by representatives of the gambling house. Once you step inside, the picture changes. There are well-mannered people all around, a pleasant atmosphere, smiles, and a complete absence of violence. Alex immediately warned his vampire not to do anything stupid and to control herself. Alice was supposed to just sit and watch the other players, without interfering in anything and certainly not trying to drink someone else's blood. Meanwhile, Alex happily sat down at the table, ready to show what he was really capable of. It wouldn't be easy, as he would be playing against a dealer with a knack for blocking the fundamentals. The player affected by this skill does not benefit from other abilities and loses the usual advantage. This dealer's name was Pedro, and it was he who brought in the lion's share of all the profits for the gambling house. The game started big, and Phantom almost immediately earned more than $500,000 without changing his expression. Everything was going too well, and at some point he even decided to go all in. The dealer was confident in himself, prepared to activate his skills and block his opponent's luck. His deft hands usually dealt perfect cards, but not today. The player was lucky again and again, and it was no longer possible to write it off as a mere coincidence. Everything that happened was made possible by the use of skill and subtle substitution of cards. Crazy money was earned in a matter of minutes, without stress or unnecessary movements. As soon as Alex decided to take all the chips he had earned, he was immediately surrounded by security. They felt he was cheating the mountain house and were ready to gut the guy, leaving him with nothing. As soon as he reached for the chips, the guards' faces changed, too abruptly and too synchronously. The head of security ordered the player to be immediately taken to a private room for a tough conversation. When a huge Chinese man approached Alex, a real martial arts masterclass began. Phantom was already tired of sitting on chairs and clearly missed real drive. He got what he wanted, warmed up, and started beating up the guards as if they were punching bags in front of him. Even pistols didn't help. This guy was always one step ahead. He dodged bullets Matrix style, only without the slow motion and philosophy, pure practice and anger. Meanwhile, Alice didn't even pay attention to what was happening and calmly enjoyed the cocktail that looked like blood. They say that such a drink can revive passionate love between lovers. While Alex was beating up one guard after another, the head of security finally realized who exactly was in the gambling house. He opened the news and saw that this man had just recently received the highest rank in Korea. Even in America, there are only about 20 such people, and only a fool would decide to deal with them by force. If he wants, he can easily destroy all of Las Vegas and take all the chips without leaving a trace. The head of security raised his palm, and his men froze as suddenly as if their sound had simply been turned off. He took off his jacket, slowly knelt down and began to apologize, drenched in cold sweat. Since the fight had to be stopped, the player decided to demand substantial compensation. He was ready to win much more, so he demanded that the gambling house pay him $10 million. It was a crazy amount of money, gigantic even by Las Vegas standards. But they had no choice, and within a few minutes a large transfer was deposited into Phantom's bank account. This way he filled his wallet and was perfectly prepared to participate in black market trading. Soon his personal driver picked him up and took him to a place where ordinary mortals are not allowed. The huge house, flooded with bright light, looked like a mirage in the middle of the desert. The owner let Alice out so that he wouldn't be so bored and she could be useful if something happened. A crowd of aristocrats had gathered inside, and the level of ostentatious upbringing was literally through the roof. But behind this politeness were hidden the same hyenas from the jungle, ready to tear each other apart for profit. Each of them was ready to give their last penny just to get an artifact with an advantage in the test tower. Thanks to magical energy, many lost ancient treasures began to be reborn. It is here that they can be bought, and it is this place that attracts the most diverse and most dangerous participants. Alice again smelled the unpleasant odor, which its source did not even try to hide or disguise. This heavy, putrid aroma emanated from the head of the Manhwa Association, a necromancer named Julius. A battered Michael stood behind his teacher, his head down and clearly afraid to even look Alex in the eyes. Julius looked at the Phantom for a long time in silence, as if he was weighing in his mind whether he should be feared right now. His abilities could truly be called luxurious, and in order to copy such skills, it was time to sign up for a paid seminar with him. Julius carried himself with confidence and immediately dropped formalities, and yet he smelled as if he hadn't left the dungeon for months. He stated that he was interested in the Phantom, and if Alex was at all familiar with him, he was obliged to provide all the information. The old man hoped that his straightforwardness and pressure would frighten the young man, but he miscalculated very badly. At the end, he tried to threaten with consequences, but Alex had already stopped listening to him. He made it clear that he was not interested in such scoundrels, and that he was not going to discuss one of his friends. With his calm but arrogant response, he clearly angered the Mains and made new, dangerous enemies for himself. Now they will have to be destroyed. Otherwise, they will wait for the right moment and strike in the back, fatally and without warning. Meanwhile, the next black market auction has started, and most of the participants have already taken their places. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was waiting for the next truly valuable artifact to appear. A meteorite that fell in Arizona just a few weeks ago is currently up for auction. This space stone has been radiating powerful magic ever since the trial tower was built. People began to compete fiercely, offering hundreds of thousands of dollars for the chance to get their hands on the meteorite. Alex knew perfectly well that there was no one capable of processing this stone yet, which meant there was no point in participating in the crazy race. Only thanks to his knowledge he was able to properly use the meteorite and combine it with other material. The money he earned at the casino allowed him to easily beat other people's bets and almost take his desired prize. Everything changed when someone offered $1 million. The room instantly fell silent, as if after a gunshot. From that moment on, the auction seemed to turn upside down. Julius made a crazy bet, and it was obvious that it was not an accident but a deliberate strike. The participants were not prepared for such numbers, because even here, there were unspoken rules. You can't just outbid someone several times over, otherwise they'll start looking at you completely differently. From that moment on, Julius tried to take every next lot for himself. As soon as Alex showed interest, the experienced necromancer immediately intervened. His budget looked bottomless, as if he wasn't playing with his own money. The guy who had made it through the testing tower suddenly looked like a failure here. With each blow of the hammer, the pressure increased, as if they were hitting not the lot, but Alex's nerves. It was noticeable how his composure was crumbling inside, even if outwardly he maintained a cold calm. Julius took all the precious artifacts that Phantom came here for. At some point, even Michael cautiously suggested that he back off so as not to lose all the money. After this, the young fool quickly realized that it was better not to anger the boss. Otherwise, he could get a couple of blows to the head. Even if the main association suffers losses, it will still receive a lot of valuable artifacts. Later, these things can easily be exchanged for information about the Phantom, which worries Julius so much. The administrator then presented a chessboard, which at first glance looked like an ordinary trinket. Alex showed interest and offered $50,000 without showing it. His bid was instantly outbid, and the fight for the artifact flared up with renewed vigor. Julius was willing to pay any amount of money, even if he was given an ordinary chessboard in return. At some point, Phantom reached his limit and bet all the money he had earned in the Tortuga Mountain Lodge. It was risk and pure agony, exactly the moment the seasoned necromancer had been waiting for. Julius grinned widely and raised the bet to a staggering $30 million. It was becoming clear that if Alex wanted to get his hands on this item, he would have to reveal at least some information. He felt broken and empty, admitting for the first time that he was inferior to his rival in this area. In combat, in experience, and in survival, he was the best. But here, completely different rules applied. Alex was about to retreat when Alice's voice sounded calmly nearby. She offered $100 million without emotion, as if she were ordering coffee. The main association certainly didn't have such reserves, which meant that victory belonged to Miss Chief Vampire. To ordinary people, she looked like a spoiled teenager, so she was immediately asked to provide proof of financial independence. Alice opened the portal, and everyone gathered saw mountains of gold that looked like a real pirate treasure from legends. Each jewel was quickly checked, and it was discovered that the crown alone was worth almost $500 million. Julius, who just a few minutes ago was smiling and enjoying his success, suddenly realized that he was far from the biggest player here. He calmly rose from his seat and, without further ado, ordered his assistant to immediately move to Plan B. No one really understood what exactly this meant, but the old man immediately left, and Michael Joudreau remained standing with an ominous smile. As soon as Alice was given the artifact she had won, she handed it over to her owner without hesitation. This gesture once again showed that the cold and calculating girl was gradually getting used to the new world. An alliance with humans no longer seemed such a bad idea to her, and somewhere deep inside the thought of a possible friendship is born. But it was too early to relax. At that moment, a powerful explosion thundered in the auction hall. The huge roof began to collapse and people immediately panicked. The crowd rushed in different directions, trying to find an exit or at least shelter. Chaos turned the well-bred aristocrats into a wild herd in seconds. The money ran out, but the instincts remained. It was at this moment that Michael Joudreau entered the stage, clutching his ominous sword of death. He quickly got tired of the demonstration game and used the molten magic of the mains. The ancient technique deployed magic circles, turning the people around into bloody mincemeat. He then activated a skill that would cause madness through bursts of magic directly into the victims' minds. Michael didn't care that there were children among the visitors. He was only thinking about revenge. One of Korea's strongest players wasn't about to turn a blind eye to this. Michael Joudreau crossed all boundaries and fully deserved death for his actions. Michael had no intention of dying yet and even called several dead people for help. These were not ordinary skeletons, but creepy zombies with Hulk DNA. Stopping such monsters will not be easy, because Michael no longer has to restrain his potential. The main plan had failed, and now he wanted only one thing: to destroy the man who had humiliated him. The approach of the monsters did not frighten Phantom. On the contrary, for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. Until now, he had felt awkward while participating in the auction. but now he was back in the familiar conditions of chaos. Now Phantom will not give in to anyone, even if he has to squeeze out the last drop of mana. While Alex was destroying the monsters, Michael noticed the disappearance of a little girl. It seems that this pervert took an interest in Alice and decided to subjugate her. To prevent him from feeling powerful, the battle must be ended as quickly as possible. Using the sword graveyard technique, Alex is able to speed up the process significantly. The problem was that there were too many bodies of people who had died during the chaos around. Their souls easily transformed into new monsters, allowing them to resume the battle again and again. Gradually, the Phantom's resources approached the critical point. This is a standard tactic for a necromancer, but Alex wasn't about to play by someone else's rules. We'll have to burn everything to the ground, even the bodies of the people left in the hall. Every necromancer relies on darkness, and only light can turn its power against him. The Phantom did it perfectly, acting like kryptonite for the dead. By combining light and ice, Alex created something more than just a magical flash. After that, it became clear that the fight was already over. Michael just hadn't had time to realize it yet. The attack wave wiped out all of his monsters, depriving him of his last support. When Michael tried to fight personally, it became obvious that he was completely helpless. All he knew was how to speak beautifully, play to the crowd, and hide behind the backs of the dead. Left alone, Michael instantly lost all his courage. There was no time for games today. Cold and fair retribution was required. Michael Jadreau deserved death for his crimes against humanity. Over the next half hour, his lungs will fill with blood and he will slowly begin to choke. Many people consider fire to be the most terrible thing, but suffocation is much more painful, especially when there is an elixir nearby that can save you from suffering. If Michael shares information about the main association, Alex promises him his life. There was too much blood in his mouth and he couldn't speak, so he decided to show off his artistic talent. Just as he tried to write a few words in his own blood, as if leaving a message, the foot of fate stopped him mercilessly. It looked like a blatant mockery, and a bold hint that Michael could no longer avoid a painful and demonstrative death. Michael jerked, tried to resist, but was unable to do anything without someone else's orders and support behind him. While he was choking on his own blood and losing the last of his consciousness, Alex calmly looked around, assessing the situation. Everyone around ran away in search of salvation and completely forgot about the artifacts of the trading house, leaving them unattended. Here you could find the heart of an ichthyosaur, and even a safe created by Michelangelo himself, about which there were legends. By combining several of these items, you can create the truly massive inventory space that players dream of. Alex was sure that he was left here completely alone, until suddenly, a calm male voice was heard from behind. This was the man who conducted the auction and occupied a high and very influential position here. He stood next to his little son, whom Phantom had recently pulled from the rubble and saved from death. To somehow thank their savior, they decided to secretly give him the artifacts and not tell anyone about it. Family happiness turned out to be much more important to them than any relics, because such things cannot be bought for money. For the first time in his life, Phantom felt like he had accomplished something more than just completing another level, and he genuinely enjoyed the feeling. While Alex was dealing with his problems and the consequences of the battle, events on the third floor of the tower were unfolding no less violently. The Cathedral of Hatred, rumored to have been built 1,000 years ago, was mortally dangerous to be in right now. The sheer number of hidden traps could kill even a well-prepared and experienced player. Molly and her partner Scott have just completed another death corridor. There had never been a warm relationship between them, and Molly's hot temper constantly made itself felt. They could have clashed even after a successful operation, but today they both understood that they needed to be as serious as possible. The main association came to them and couldn't believe that the two had been working together for over 10 years and were still arguing. He called them together because a new character had appeared that required special and urgent attention. This character's name was Alex, and according to rumors, he was an experienced player even back in the days of the old virtual game. Main Association hid from international scrutiny in the testing tower, which seriously limited their influence on the changed world. The two mercenaries didn't take their allies' words seriously, thinking that Alex was just another noob who always sat at home. In any case, they were ordered to eliminate the threat and fulfill their purpose as quickly as possible. If they fail the task this time, no one will give them a second chance. In a changed world, it wasn't just criminals who tried to become stronger and grab a piece of power for themselves. Even ordinary players trained non-stop, gradually improving their level and skills. Jessica, known by her nickname Fire Fist, beat up her friend Mark again during training. He had never been a master of close combat, but he was still afraid to refuse training with his friend. After another tough workout, it's time to take a little rest and take a look at the latest news. A certain phantom is going to fight the third-floor boss today, and they promised to broadcast it live. Many people thought that this guy was just bluffing because such a task could not be accomplished alone. There was something defiant about his behavior, as if he was deliberately playing outside the established rules. The problem with the third floor was that the tree asked too complex and tricky questions. At first glance, everything looked easy and calm, but this feeling quickly gave way to real anarchy. The wooden sage greeted visitors and asked riddles. That was his entire mission. If Alex answers 3 questions, he will receive a sheet that he can choose himself. If he makes a mistake, the stone statues will instantly crush him to the ground, without a chance of salvation. The first question was, what is the optimal depth and temperature for Kellhorns to live in seawater? Everyone watching the broadcast held their breath and immediately realized that it would be extremely difficult to answer. Almost no one in the world knew the answer, but Phantom unexpectedly and very confidently declared that these monsters live at a depth of 175 meters at a temperature of 0 degrees. He didn't even wait for the sage's confirmation, knowing that his answer was absolutely correct. Another question followed, to which Alex just as calmly gave the correct answer. The same thing happened with the third riddle, as if he knew in advance what exactly he would be asked. The sage laughed and admitted that he had never met such intelligent and prepared people before. The comments exploded, as if a Twitch blogger had suddenly started criticizing the president on live TV. Now the player has the right to choose absolutely any leaf without restrictions. The red leaf grants the power of fire, the yellow leaf significantly increases defense, and the green leaf increases speed. If you have a long boss fight ahead, Jessica believes it's smartest to choose speed. Alex unexpectedly replied that he was not at all interested in ordinary sheets and standard reinforcements. He demanded a blacklist, an option that is usually not chosen by those who want to live peacefully and without consequences. The other players were unaware of this. It was the first time they had heard of the existence of some kind of black sheet. Some even decided that the Phantom had gone crazy and was simply trying to deliberately anger the sage. But Alex was extremely confident in his words and firmly, without a shadow of a doubt, demanded that he be given the required sheet. According to ancient rules, the sage had no right to refuse, so he was forced to keep his word. Black leaf significantly increases attack potential and creates a special decomposition effect. Apparently, this was exactly what was needed to fight the stone statues, who were already preparing to enter the battle. While Alex was storming the third floor, the entrance to this place was carefully guarded by representatives of various guilds. This was done to ensure that no one interfered with either the Phantom's battle or the agreements between him and the strongest bosses. Only a madman would dare to venture here, or someone who has long been accustomed to playing at a hardcore level with no room for error. The guards were too engrossed in their conversation, and when they turned around they saw that all their comrades were already dead. Some unknown force passed through the protection and prepared to administer its own justice. No one had time to do anything. Everything happened quickly, clearly, and frighteningly harmoniously. The experienced necromancer finally appeared with his people to put his diabolical plan into action. By this time, the masked man was already sweating from fighting against the giant stone statues without a break. Comments were flying in from all sides. The audience was going crazy watching his skill and composure. He calmly dealt with the stone monsters and confidently moved on, as if playing along with the audience. Most streamers constantly interact with the chat, trying to maintain attention and increase views. Alex acted as if the stream didn't even exist, and that's what made him more interesting than any TikTok trend. Oddly enough, this behavior made him even more beloved, and the worldwide excitement only continued to grow. Just as he was about to complete the third-floor raid, a powerful explosion occurred, ruining everything. The broadcast automatically ended and viewers' attention instantly switched to another event. Right now, near the giant palace, a large-scale battle between the dead was beginning. The dead summoned by Julius were supposed to fight the local stone monsters. Alex hurried to the battlefield, determined to see for himself how it would all turn out. At first glance, it seemed that the forces were equal and neither side had a clear advantage. To change the balance, Phantom decided to intervene and called upon the power of ice for help. He attacked the mains, because he always hated these vile bastards for their constant violations of rules and laws. With the protection of the heavens, he burst into the battle like an uninvited player online, without invitation or apology. The association quickly ran into serious problems. Their wizards couldn't cope with the influx of monsters. Julius, who believed he had brought real professionals here, saw his team in a completely different light. His squad fell apart too quickly, like a server without an admin or backup. It took Alex just a few minutes to fully understand what exactly he was dealing with. Julius created 4 teams to control the undead, but one of them had already been completely destroyed. If the first one is destroyed, and the common network is severed, all control over the undead will disappear. To do this, it was necessary to show cunning and force the stone monsters to attack the wizards even more harshly. Thanks to its incredible speed, the Phantom seemed to be practically everywhere at once. It was as if he controlled the monsters of the third floor, forcing them to do exactly what he wanted. Julius began to lose patience and seemed to stink even more than before. If Alice had been nearby, she would have definitely passed out from that disgusting smell. Nevertheless, the necromancer was confident that he would be able to gather all his forces and destroy the main enemy. To do this, he summoned an additional squad of undead from the very depths of the third floor. He had to expend a huge amount of resources and take a short break. Restoring mana was a very specific process and felt like having all the juices sucked out. It was enough to just touch a living person, and his life energy would pass into the body of the necromancer. The man turned into a soulless zombie, but Julius, on the contrary, completely regained his strength. He viewed his allies as expendable. That's what made him different from the Phantom. Alex, even if he was acting in his own interests, would never stoop to such a level. Now he was in hard and painful conditions, but this was no reason to betray his conscience and turn into a soulless animal. After this, the necromancer's most powerful army rushed forward under his deafening roar, crushing everything in its path. Julius had waited too long for the opportunity to take revenge on the Phantom, and was not going to miss his only chance. He called Alex a masked bastard who didn't even deserve the right to go up to the 4th floor. Only the most attentive viewers might have noticed that, during the battle, several mysterious figures flickered in the background. These were the same mercenaries from the main association, who received a direct order to destroy the Phantom. They discussed Julius's plan in low voices, wondering if he was doing the right thing by burning so many resources at once. The blows became heavy, his breathing became ragged, and Alex slowed down noticeably. Too noticeable even for the uninitiated. At that moment, he remembered himself as an ordinary gamer, and the advice of the sage which was etched into his memory forever. Even with the sharpest sword, he strained himself too much, losing control and wasting his strength senselessly. The teacher then pointed to a simple rope and explained that a truly powerful strike did not require brute force. The rope moves like the wind, freely, softly, cutting through space and turning resistance into emptiness. At the right moment, energy is released on its own, and even an insurmountable obstacle becomes just a step forward. These memories acted as a key, and the Phantom absorbed the skill of the spiritual sword art. Now he could reproduce this technique right here and now, in a real fight. The wind changed direction, and the army of undead began to fall too quickly, almost simultaneously. At first, the enemies did not understand what had happened, but then they saw an approaching tornado. There was no other way to describe this force. It swept everything around it away, as if someone had turned on the final mode in Avengers without the right to restart. No one could understand where he got such power from, and whether Phantom really sold his soul to the devil. When everyone was getting pretty tired of the battle, Alex decided to end it without any unnecessary effects. Frightened, Julius lost the last of his confidence and began to tremble like a wet puppy in an icy wind. All he could do was give the order to continue the fight while he tried to escape, like a Marvel villain who realized he wouldn't live to see the credits. If he thought he could get away with it, it was a fatal mistake. Only before his death did Julius realize that all this time he had been fighting with only one person. His two main enemies turned out to be the same person, but he will not share this secret with anyone. Julius, the great boss of the main association, crumbled to dust in a matter of seconds. The one who considered himself the master of the dead realized that the undead are not a panacea against the Phantom. The army of the dead disappeared along with Julius, and the association's wizards were left alone with the stone monsters. Panicked screams did not help anyone, and very soon they all went to the kingdom of the dead. Having lost a lot of strength and resources, feeling pain in every muscle, Alex slowly returned to the castle. He had to drink a solution to replenish his mana, and only after that did the world stop swimming before his eyes. Then he raised his shield again and gripped his dagger, preparing for the next test without respite. The temple guard, the lord of the four principles, met him without unnecessary words or ceremony. The Phantom liked it. No talking like in the old John Wick, where movements decide everything. The previous battle had taken too many resources, and to avoid running out of mana, we had to hurry. Cutting through the stone monsters with his blade, he walked forward without hesitation or doubt. The key leading to the main hall instantly responded to the Phantom's appearance. The entity behind the gate responded to the call, and things began to get really interesting. After fighting the guards, a Buddha with 1,000 arms appeared in front of the player. It was the first time he had seen a man who had managed to reach him after passing all the preliminary tests. Phantom calmly stated that he had come to destroy the third-floor boss, as if he had already watched this boss fight on YouTube and knew the ending. Buddha offered to talk a little, knowing in advance that the guy would refuse. Then he took out his swords and instantly turned into a bloodthirsty tyrant. Phantom became the first player to reach this stage of the tower. No one had even gotten around to talking to the wooden sage and his questions. With each passing minute, the battle became more intense and dangerous. My legs felt like cotton wool, like after a marathon in Elden Ring without saving. He tried to hold on using his skills, realizing that this was his last trump card. His legs wouldn't obey him, and Alex realized that it wasn't his muscles that would decide what to do next, but calculation. All hope remained in the special skills and clever tricks they brought with them. First, he distracted attention with a shield, and then threw a magic dagger right on target. All that was left was to harness the blood energy and ensure continuous damage. To get rid of the poison, Buddha was forced to sacrifice his own arm. Only then did he understand what the experienced player had been leading up to from the start. In each hand was a god's gemstone that could be combined with the grimoire of the Principality of Peltaros. Together, these items allow you to create the Golden Dawn of Lemegeton, an artifact of the highest tier. This great book of magic was written by Solomon himself to unlock potential to its absolute limit. It's hard to even comment on what happened next. It's as if the system has completely gone crazy. To defeat Buddha, Alex was forced to forget about classical fighting, turn on the music, and change his style. While the boss of the third floor was angry and did not understand what was happening, Phantom quickly changed his appearance. He turned on the music and transformed into a male version of Rapunzel, absurd, dangerous, and deadly effective. This completely infuriated Buddha. He was not used to being spoken to in such a tone, let alone behaved in such a way. Buddha struck at once with everything he had: blades, pressure, waves of force. The ice cracked, creaked, but still held on. The main association silently watched the battle, without interfering for a second. They couldn't understand how he was going to defeat the great god just by turning on the music. It looked like Buddha had been challenged to a fight, and he had ended up at someone else's wedding without an invitation or an evacuation plan. It was also the first time they had seen a player use a wig in a clear attempt to throw his opponent off his rhythm. Now, even the mercenaries doubted that they could defeat him together. This guy turned out to be too prepared. Molly suggested an immediate retreat, while Scott still wanted to take the risk to improve his place in the hierarchy. He had one special coin that could help in such a hopeless situation. By that time, Alex had already noticed the surveillance and realized that after the battle he would have to be especially careful. Now he focused on the battle and directed all his forces and remaining resources here. To defeat such an opponent, you will have to combine your skills and go all the way without any room for error. He struck with different elements, alternating fire and ice, trying to knock Buddha out of his usual rhythm. At some point, the god got tired of this and activated a barrier trap, closing the space around the player. The Phantom found himself between heaven and earth, and only the ice shield kept him from certain death. Mana was leaving in spurts, breathing was ragged, and every movement was echoed by a dull pain inside the body. Time seemed to speed up, and Buddha sensed this, coldly saying that resistance was pointless. To fall into God's disfavor was like signing a contract with the devil with one's own blood. First, Alex fell into a trap, and then it was as if he had activated a divine spear, deciding to end the fight with one blow. The attack was powerful and merciless, and a confident, mocking smile appeared on the god's face. He was confident of victory, and had already seen how he got rid of the annoying rat, but the living Phantom was still standing in front of him. The guy in the wig didn't even seem embarrassed, and continued fighting as if he was in control of every second of the fight. Alex activated the ice prison technique in time and finally forced Buddha to plunge into the cold. He even found the strength to mock. He created ice sculptures mocking the god. By this point, the copying conditions had been met and Phantom had taken control of the mandala ability. Now he could imbue weapons with special powers, and the wig became completely unnecessary. The huge Buddha statue lost its influence and became just a target to be destroyed. With a powerful blow to the frozen body, Alex shattered the god into small pieces. After defeating such an opponent, his level automatically increased. He finally got his hands on the key that could summon the hidden boss of this area. All the past battles had taken too much strength, and every next step was difficult. It was necessary to urgently replenish mana. The next threat could be the last. The test tower lived by its own rules. At night, the temperature dropped sharply. During these hours, the monsters became more aggressive and stronger, and most of the players left the floor. The remaining ones sought shelter and stopped hunting until dawn. These rules applied to the Phantom as well. He knew how dangerous it was to tempt fate. He decided to take a break, eat and recuperate before the next tests. Even during the battle, Alex noticed the mains following him and realized that he just needed to wait for their turn. Under cover of night, two mercenaries emerged from the bushes. hiding their true intentions behind friendly smiles. They pretended to be lost and simply looking for a place near the fire to wait out the night. Alex did not resist and calmly met the two hidden enemies. He prepared a lot of delicious food and even offered them some to warm up, relax, and recuperate after a busy day. Molly, seeing the delicious fried shrimp in front of her, forgot about all her plans and tasks for a second. Only the cold-blooded and calculating Scott stopped the girl, reminding her that she shouldn't eat food from a stranger if she wanted to save her own face and life first and foremost. The Phantom decided to brighten up the dark and cold evening by proposing an unexpected and clearly dangerous game. He promised to take off his mask and show his true face, but only if he received honest answers to 3 questions. Scott didn't understand what this guy was up to. He tensed up and felt discomfort in literally every cell of his body. Nevertheless, he accepted the terms of the game and decided to take a risk, realizing that it was too late to retreat. To do this, they were going to use that very coin, which only at first glance seemed like an ordinary trinket. The players agreed to ask counter questions, and the mercenaries were given the right to start first. Only those who had completed the Tower of Trials game actually knew what Caligula's coin was. You need to choose a target and pour magic into the coin for several minutes to influence the opponent's mind, almost like crypto advertising. Impressive in words, dangerous in practice, and always with consequences. The mercenaries tried to find out if the Phantom had any allies here. He answered honestly that he came completely alone, and then asked a counter question. Why did Molly and Scott just watch and not fight the boss? They explained it as caution and waiting for the perfect moment. It sounded plausible, but it still left an unpleasant feeling. After this, the parties exchanged a few more banal questions until the conversation reached the moment of truth. Finally, Alex decided to add some heat and make the game much more fun and dangerous. He was curious to know if the main association really believed that 2 mercenaries were enough to stop the Phantom. Molly smiled openly and, instead of surprise, a frank desire to draw blood flashed in her eyes. Alex had long since uncovered their true intentions and realized that there was no point in playing with questions any longer. If they came here to kill him, they might try to do it right now. The girl suddenly grabbed the magic coin and pointed the artifact at the masked guy. A second passed, then another, and nothing happened, and the silence made the situation especially awkward. In fact, everything was fine with Caligula's coin. It's just that now it can't be used due to the effect of another skill. The Court of Anubis has been activated for a long time now, and has reduced all mercenary stats by exactly half. The terrified allies tried to switch to Plan B, although deep down they already knew that they were facing a fiasco. An ominous aura spread around the Phantom, and the outcome of this battle became clear even before the first blow. 2 huge wooden statues came to life to punish people who had lost their conscience and fear. The sacrifice awakened these pillars, and now it became clear what the Phantom's plan had been all along. He didn't want to waste extra energy on them, so he called on outside beings for help. The mercenaries found themselves in a critical situation, even though the battle hadn't really even begun. The cattle tried to escape, but the protective barrier blocked its path in time. The boy found himself in such a desperate situation that he did not hesitate to call Molly for help. She didn't have time to save her friend and could only watch as the monsters mercilessly tore him apart. The body was simply crushed, after all the bones had been broken. The sight was truly hellish. During all this time, Alex heard many stories about the Manes, but he still did not understand their real purposes. If people don't climb the tower, humanity will disappear. Then why interfere with those who are still trying to change something? The Phantom never considered himself a cruel killer or a tyrant. He was simply pursuing his own goals. He offered Molly a deal. Valuable information about the organization in exchange for her life. The girl admitted that she does not know the names of the clients, but one of the bosses is called Lancelot. Besides him, there are more than 10 other key figures, but their names are strictly classified. The leadership is confident that if the 12 cursed relics of the tower are collected, the Mains will be able to survive even after the destruction of humanity. They promise a huge reward for this, although few believe in it. Listening to her, Alex understood one thing. The Mains were not playing for survival, but for the end of the world, confusing fanaticism with calculation. They try to summon the devil and hope that he will bless them after the destruction of humanity. Ignoring such criminals can no longer be an option. This organization will have to be destroyed. Molly kept her end of the bargain and spared her life. But Alex wasn't going to let her go, and without hesitation he activated the soul brand technique again. From this moment on, she is obliged to obey all his orders, and any attempt at betrayal will end in an inglorious death. The next morning, Phantom greeted his subscribers and announced that there would be no broadcast today. He promised to defeat the third-floor boss and later upload the full video to the server. The stone key was activated to open the portal and finally meet the hidden master of this place. The third floor turned out to be so multifaceted that it was difficult to even approximately count the number of dangerous creatures here. As the doors swung open, huge stone statues began to emerge from within. It was a full-fledged army, unquestioningly following the orders of the boss of the third floor named Mukon. Many tried to fight his army, but only one man dared to challenge the master himself using the key. It seemed like this guy always had an ace up his sleeve and knew exactly what he was doing. To do this, he needed the very same chessboard obtained from a closed black auction house. Chess pieces appeared out of nowhere. It was magic worthy of much higher floors of the tower. With this method, one man could replace an entire army, but that was not the end of it. A surprised Mukon watched as Alex summoned the enhancement pill. She instantly strengthened all the figures and turned them into full-fledged fighting warriors. Few knew that Alex actually had several allies involved in this battle. Old Man Gilbert and little Samantha were his enemies until recently. Now they have directed all their internal resources solely towards creating sculptures. The next step was the technique of magic saturation, without which the plan simply could not work. Linda, who could not refuse her master, was even brought into the matter. At some point, they all felt like they were part of something truly big. If this means cooperating with the strongest player in the tower, then there is nothing wrong with that. Thanks to the help of his allies, Alex was able to directly challenge the hidden boss of the third floor. Sitting on his warhorse, he felt his chances of victory growing with each passing minute. Each boss and each monster guards its own floor and feeds on the mana of that particular area. Moreover, not only players but also the bosses themselves can climb the tower, increasing their own power. Alex was sure that his opponent was not as strong as he tried to appear. In fact, Mukon is simply stuck on the third floor and is unable to climb higher. These words touched the boss and forced him to make the first move in this chess game. Feeling the numerical advantage, he ordered the stone monsters to move forward. In response, the chessboard skill was activated and all pieces received a threefold boost. The experienced Grandmaster immediately made a counter move, knowing exactly how to contain such an opponent. The pieces moved together and apart without any unnecessary noise. Every move was nerve-wracking, and Mukon suddenly realized that he was no longer in control, but merely reacting. Alex knew that competent control of the center and timely attacks could even out the difference in numbers. His figures weren't just strengthened, they had all the characteristics needed to destroy stone monsters. At the same time, Alex himself constantly used the element of fire, adding heat to this fierce battle. In just a few seconds, he dealt with the advance group and made Mukon noticeably nervous. Trembling hands and a rough voice gave the order to the second group to immediately engage in battle. The clash of monsters continued for several hours, and almost no one could count on taking the initiative. At one point, the boss even laughed, looking like a Forbes billionaire who still believes in control, while the numbers are already going into the negative. Finding himself in a tough spot, Alex decided it was time to bring his queen onto the board. The graceful shoes and elegant gait immediately gave away Alice von Adoratia. Only she could look so graceful and at the same time so sinister. Mukin ordered the stone warriors to break through and destroy the queen at any cost. He never realized that before him stood a higher vampire, capable of turning the outcome of the entire game around. Alex ordered his pieces to ignore the enemy and focus on attacking. He deliberately lured the enemy into a trap in order to expose the king and deliver the fatal blow. Alice had been nothing but bait all along, and perhaps that was why she looked so displeased. She wanted a more significant role, but sometimes you have to sacrifice your own ambitions to win. Now, the main factor in this battle became speed. The third-floor boss was rushing to destroy Queen Alice, while Alex himself went on the attack against Mukan. Whoever is faster will take the victory. That was the whole strategy. Alice found herself surrounded, and even the gods watching the battle visibly tensed. It seemed like this was the end, but the pale girl was in no hurry to panic and seemed to be in complete control of the situation even now. Mukin sensed the approaching danger and declared that he would crush all of Phantom's hopes right now. He ordered his defense team to attack immediately and get rid of the annoying cockroach. The statue of David and the great Bodhisattva stepped forward to carry out their boss's order without hesitation. They mocked the man, claiming that they had seen far stronger and more prepared warriors in the human world. But then everyone around tensed up, noticing that the guy continued to laugh. A minute before his own death, he acted as if he knew exactly what was going to happen next, and was simply waiting patiently for fate to make its move. When Alice and Alex discussed the plan, she tried to dissuade him from taking such a crazy risk. They had grown closer recently, and for the first time the blood lover had truly begun to worry about her master. All that was required of him was for the queen to fulfill her role, lure the monsters into a trap and destroy them. It was now that she found herself at the very point where she could no longer delay. It was time to act. Alice summoned fire on herself and then activated the legendary blood spear technique. Even the gods froze. What happened next looked more like an execution than an ordinary battle. The stone statues seemed unaware of who they were challenging and what the consequences would be for them. The bloody spears pierced the monsters with frightening ease, passing through them like a knife through butter. Alice was doing her job perfectly, and her skills were growing with each passing minute. A bloody explosion was ready to wipe out the remnants of the attacking group. Everyone who came to attack the queen was defeated, and even the boss of the third floor could not prevent this. Mukin couldn't understand how such a fragile girl could possess such bottomless strength. It violated all the laws of the tower. He looked at what was happening as if he had invested in NFTs at their peak, and only now realized that there was no more liquidity. By this time, Alex had already gotten closer, and finally used that very black leaf that responded to the energy of bloody rage. The resulting effect could be called an attack modifier. It destroyed the opponent's very mind. Alex channeled this energy into the spear and threw it right at the target, already tasting the sweet taste of victory. The stone army was unable to resist. Their minds were completely enslaved. The old allies began to quarrel with each other, and this became a clear sign of rebellion. The great Bodhisattva bitterly admitted that he never liked David. This handsome man has always attracted too many women with his face and perfect abs. Now it's time to take away these advantages from him and finally take revenge. The statues lost their minds and began to fight each other furiously, forgetting their true purpose. The army, which was considered invincible, seemed to have been infected with a plague and lost all intentions. And all this happened because of one single person, a fact that was hard to believe. While Mukan was trembling with fear, Alex was confidently approaching his goal. All that remained was to defeat the last defender who stood in his way. With the help of combined skills, this was done quickly and without hesitation. The Grand Master delivered the finishing blow, and the third-floor boss was finally released from his torment. It was checkmate, declared by the strongest player, and opened the way to the fourth floor of the testing tower. Even Alice, who had seen many horrific scenes, had never seen such a breathtaking sight. The system notified all players that the passage to the fourth floor had just been opened. Everyone who worked with Phantom realized that this guy really did it. Friends, allies, business partners, and ordinary people felt they were living in the era of a special person. Alex himself didn't pay any attention to this, completely immersed in thoughts about the fourth floor. This battle significantly increased his level and prepared his body for the next step. Only at first glance did it seem that he emerged unharmed. In fact, his whole body ached with pain. The only thing that distracted him from his suffering was the award for the completed stage. As a reward, he received an orange chest filled with artifacts. Inside were skills, magic items, and basic stat boosts. Hidden deep within the chest was the effect of monopolization. With this effect, getting through the fourth floor looked much easier. You could tell by the hero's expression. Alice looked at him as if he was incorrigible, but at the same time damn attractive. Meanwhile, another closed meeting took place among the bosses of influential guilds. They couldn't understand how a lone wolf could carry out his plan and achieve such success. It seemed as if the gods were truly helping him. Otherwise, the birth of a new hero simply could not be explained. Only Felix was dissatisfied and had no intention of celebrating someone else's success. He started shouting, choking on words and arguments, like a man who had already realized that the train had left, but was still arguing with the schedule. All the views and artifacts went to the guy in the mask, while the influential guilds were left empty-handed. At that moment, Teresa couldn't bear her inner emotions and exploded like a nuclear warhead with no countdown. She reminded that it was the Phantom who did all the dirty work, and thanks to him, humanity received extra time. Teresa hoped that the other bosses would support her, but in response she heard only silence, heavy, dull, like in a room where politicians suddenly lost their teleprompter. An emptiness appeared inside, and a bitter tear appeared in my eyes, which was no longer possible to hide. At that moment, she finally realized. The local bosses did not appreciate Phantom's contribution and had no intention of doing so. Teresa announced that she was leaving the Guild Association, even though working there had once been her dream. The Holy Angel of Amsterdam was not one to go back on her word. She confidently opened the doors and walked forward without looking back. After returning from the testing tower, Alex felt squeezed, like a lemon thrown under a press. There was almost no strength left, and the only desire was to simply rest before new challenges. At that moment, he received an unexpected call from Jessica. Her voice was trembling, and she said that her grandfather was in big trouble. No more words were needed. One phrase was enough for Alex to instantly jump up from his seat. Everyone knew Jessica as Fire Fist, but few realized that she was the granddaughter of the legendary martial artist, Mr. Christopher. She was always resilient, active, and cheerful, until a real tragedy happened in her life. Upon learning of her grandfather's condition, Jessica became a quiet, broken princess, constantly fighting back tears. Alex saw her in such a state for the first time and immediately asked her to tell everything in order. After a surprise attack, a martial artist decided to help civilians, despite his age and lost speed. He fought to the last, saving civilians, until he was seriously wounded and infected with a dangerous disease. This man was once considered the strongest in Korea, but now he couldn't even open his eyes. Christopher was on the brink of death, and if he could be saved, there would be a chance to copy the legendary skill. The doors of the medical ward swung open, and the head physician entered along with his assistants. Dr. Arthur was abrupt and immediately declared that there was nothing he could do to help the patient. In the voice of a man who treats according to the principle, "If I don't understand, then it's impossible." He tried to throw out the uninvited guests, but Alex made it clear that he was not going anywhere. At first glance, it became clear. This young doctor had not yet gained any experience or real knowledge. Several months passed, and my grandfather still didn't get better, as if he hadn't been treated at all. Arthur created the appearance of work, limiting himself to IVs and avoiding full-fledged examinations. This was alarming, but no one could clearly say what exactly would help the legendary master. Phantom decided to intervene and, without hesitation, activated the greedy gaze technique. Having read the doctor's thoughts, he realized that in front of him was neither a villain nor a genius, but an emptiness in a medical gown. Arthur memorized terms like a schoolboy memorizes formulas, without understanding their meaning or application. His main goal was to extort money from patients' families and quietly profit from other people's misfortunes. He succeeded in this so much that until now, no one suspected that they were dealing with a typical swindler. Alex openly accused the doctor and made it clear that he would not allow himself to be deceived anymore. No matter how Arthur justified himself, his thoughts had already been read, and the verdict had been passed without a trial. The doctor's money had long been scattered among fake names and crypto wallets, and he felt safe, until he realized that the private keys were no longer his alone. After that, Jessica once again became the same fire fist that made her opponents tremble. In everyday life, she was soft and lively, but in battle she turned into a predator. Alex asked her to calm down and continued reading his interlocutor's thoughts. He learned that the doctor was connected to the Black Luck Guild, which had made contact with the tower's inhabitants. This discovery turned everything upside down. Other problems instantly faded into the background. For the tower's inhabitants, humans have become a serious external threat, and it seems they are preparing something truly terrible. Because of this conversation, everyone almost forgot about their grandfather, whose condition suddenly worsened. Internal bleeding was a clear sign of danger, and the fake doctor didn't even know what to do about it. To avoid shame, Arthur decided to simply run away, hoping that it would make things easier. He almost left the office, but the flexible Jessica stopped him in time. One more unnecessary movement and her foot would crush his skull, leaving him permanently disabled. She was ready to kill, but Phantom suddenly stopped her and asked her to calm down. Now it was much more important to cure the patient, who had been experiencing unbearable pain for several weeks. Arthur tried to stop the interference and reminded that he was the only one here who knew what he was doing, clinging to authority like a lifeline. This stinking chatterbox is getting on everyone's nerves. It's time for him to shut up and stop pretending to be a doctor. Fire Fist did her job without further ado, all thanks to her perfectly timed tornado technique. One blow was enough to knock out several teeth and break the jaw in 2 places at once. Alex froze for just a second, listened to his breathing, looked at his skin and realized that his body wasn't dying. It was being torn apart from the inside. The mana was not being released or processed. It was accumulating like water behind a dam without sluice gates, creating a deadly pressure. This is where the elixir obtained from the dirty and unscrupulous Michael Judrow came in handy. Alex wanted to save it for another occasion, but for the sake of life and a rare skill, sometimes you have to take risks. The elixir was immediately consumed by the patient, and a bright flash of light caused everyone in the room to squint. It took less than a minute for Christopher's breathing to even out, and for his face to stop contorting in pain. Tears of joy came to Jessica's eyes. She didn't hide her happiness and rushed to hug her grandfather. At that very moment, Alex fulfilled the conditions of copying and obtained the Heavenly Flower cultivation technique. This skill allowed one to absorb magic from the environment and accelerated mana recovery by 30%. A doctor who had been unsuccessfully treating a patient for months saw with his own eyes what happens when a true master appears. He and his assistants tried to leave, but Alex sped up the process with a precise kick. There's no other way with doctors like these. Without a tough lesson, hospitals will continue to turn into fraud factories. Arthur received a few more painful blows and found himself on the floor again, no longer feigning confidence. "I didn't want to kill him for stealing, but letting him go without punishment would have been a mistake. The doctor had to return all the stolen money and forget about medical practice forever." Meanwhile, Jessica remained by her grandfather's side when a notification came through on her phone. The account was replenished with $28 million. Financial problems could be forgotten. Having paid off his debts, Arthur hurried out of the hospital, dreaming of getting to his boss as quickly as possible. Alex deliberately let this collective farmer go in order to find out where the base of his real owners was. This task will be handled personally by Alice, who is already quite tired of sitting in the Brahmin ring doing nothing. After that, Alex returned to the room and gave Jessica a few minutes of peace. He was left alone with Mr. Christopher and spoke to him as if he had been conscious for a long time. The Phantom knew that the old man was pretending, although Christopher himself was sure that his acting talent was impeccable. They chatted for a while like old friends who had met by chance at a graduation party. Alex wanted to understand what exactly happened and where Christopher got such serious health problems. It all started with an ordinary trip to a conference, when the master did not expect any trouble. It was a standard working road which did not foreshadow any trouble. Then, right in the street, a rift opened up, from which the most dangerous creatures crawled out. The monsters arrived uninvited and immediately began massacring the civilian population. Christopher couldn't bear to watch ordinary police officers powerless against such a nightmare. People were not prepared for chaos on this scale. It was a disaster of a new level. The martial artist entered the battle and began to destroy the monsters with his bare hands. In the midst of the battle, he heard a human voice and noticed a grown, powerful man among the monsters. The stranger's smile and cold gaze made it clear that this was a challenge to the strongest of the human world. Up until this point, fighting monsters hadn't posed any serious problems. Even without his signature weapon, Christopher held himself confidently and felt his body grow younger. But when confronted with this man, confidence disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. The opponent rose into the air, raised his sword above his head, and delivered a hard, precise blow. The wound was so deep that Christopher instantly lost consciousness. Surprisingly, the enemy did not finish him off, although he could have finished everything with one move. That was the last thing he remembered, although his eyes were open as the ambulance took him to the hospital. He had never seen a person wielding a speed sword so perfectly before. It was a long-haired guy in Asian clothes, clearly a native of Muram, who dominated the 21st floor. The legendary warriors began to act increasingly unpredictably, using any means necessary to achieve their goals. Even during previous runs through the tower, Alex had encountered this clan, and now it was becoming clear that history was repeating itself. Muram was clearly interested in the outside world, and now it only remained to understand what exactly their goals were and what lay behind this interest. Not wanting to delve into unpleasant topics, the grandfather suddenly decided to change the conversation, as if deliberately avoiding dangerous thoughts. He stated that Alex had been friends with his granddaughter for a long time, which meant they could get married right away, quickly and without unnecessary formalities. I had to gently calm the old man down, ask him to take a pill and get some sleep so that he wouldn't continue asking too direct questions. In this short time, Christopher finally realized that in front of him was not just a talented player, but a truly special guy. The tower is a relatively new development, and many of the awakened who are now called experts have proven to be greatly overrated. But looking at this young and ambitious man, one got the feeling that he was playing in a completely different league. At the same time, Alex remained modest and pretended not to notice Christopher's hints and not to understand what he was getting at. Finally, the old man offered to thank his savior and promised to fulfill any of his requests without asking any questions. The conversation ended and Jessica met Alex in the cool hallway of the intensive care unit. He reassured his friend, saying that everything would be fine with his grandfather, and that now it was important to just be there and let him rest. Moreover, Christopher clearly compensated for all the losses. This was easily read by the devilish smile on the protagonist's face. Although the old man tried to look happy, a closer look revealed that something was gnawing at him inside. It seemed that the request he was asked to make was too ambitious even for such a man. After all these events, it was finally possible to return home and allow myself to relax a little. After the Las Vegas incident, Alex no longer had money problems. He ordered a sumptuous dinner, and for the first time in a long time, decided to simply enjoy life. Juicy meat in cherry sauce and cool, 10-year-old French wine made you forget all your worries. The meat literally melted in your mouth, and the baked vegetables perfectly complemented the taste. Until recently, his dinner was limited to French fries and nuggets of dubious origin. Turning on the TV, he saw that today experts had been invited to a program dedicated to the trial tower. One of them turned out to be a young ranker of the Tangoon Guild named Johnny. His handsome face quickly attracted the attention of female audiences, and his pumped-up muscles made men quietly envy him. Johnny spoke the right and safe things about power and money, like an expert commenting on a storm after the shore had washed away. He did not forget to mention that money plays a key role because it can be used to buy quality equipment. Then the conversation naturally turned to the Phantom, which was now of interest to almost every inhabitant of the Earth. Alex silently turned off the TV, not out of irritation, but because he didn't want to listen to other people's guesses about something he already knew better than anyone else. As soon as he went to bed, Alice immediately took up the wine. Like any self-respecting vampire, she decided that a little alcohol instead of blood wouldn't hurt anyone. After that, she turned the TV back on and continued listening to Johnny. He said that the 4th floor is a special dungeon where you need to endure and clear out 100 waves of attacking monsters. To do this, you need to capture and hold the base. Otherwise, the floor will be locked for 3 weeks. If you don't complete it within 90 days, something irreparable might happen. So even the Phantom won't act thoughtlessly. It was said that in case of failure, humanity could be destroyed. Now the tower system had become the supreme ruler of the world, and underestimating it was mortally dangerous. After the interview was over, Johnny got into his brand new car. He felt like a winner in life, not noticing how the system was already putting him in line, where self-confidence usually ends first. As soon as he started the car, a system message appeared on the screen. Phantom announced the start of the 4th floor, and the system reacted instantly, like the market after one sharp tweet. Johnny's heart started pounding, and he slammed his foot down on the gas pedal. The ranker immediately contacted his guild and demanded that all high-ranking players be gathered. The emergency situation did not allow them to relax. The team was unprepared, and there were only 8 hours left before the start of the battle. Alex didn't give anyone time to rest, although he himself managed to get some sleep before the start. After a short warm-up, he calmly prepared for the new stage of his life. In just an hour, the passage to the 4th floor would begin, and only the strongest would be lucky. There were only 2 ways to defend here: either build defensive towers or choose a base and hold it until the end. The second option was chosen more often. It seemed the most pragmatic. Alex was the first to reach the 4th floor, where the others were supposed to gather in 20 minutes. The dilapidated stadium immediately caught his eye. This was where he decided to locate his most promising base. To begin with, I had to do some careful preparation, sorting through materials and squeezing the most out of what was at hand. When the main work was completed, Alex returned to the city center, where the first players had already begun to appear. Renowned guilds sent their best warriors here, as everyone wanted to snatch at least a pinch of future rewards. There were also allies involved. Working together was not only more profitable, but also safer. Not only Mark and Jessica were here, but even Teresa, who had recently left the Olympus Guild. She was considered a local superstar, and meeting her like that, without warning, was a surprise to everyone. Phantom deliberately assembled a team, hoping to gain an advantage even before the real raid began. He immediately announced that the defense would have to be held at the stadium, and this decision clearly disappointed the Allies. According to Mark, at least 100 people are needed to guard such a territory. Alex looked at the situation differently, as if the rules were written for others, and he just needed to understand where exactly they could be circumvented. It was said that only 5 players were enough to defend the base. This shouldn't have made anyone nervous since the 5th member would be joining the team very soon. When they met, Stalker, as usual, drew his sword and promised to kill his sworn enemy. It all started when he was simply training in fencing, trying to raise his level to the limit. Deep meditation and grueling training were meant to merge body and mind into one. This process was interrupted by a message from Alex inviting us to the starting area on the 4th floor. Stalker refused. For him, training was always more important than any persuasion. The situation changed when Alex promised to fight him without using his left hand and right leg. The childish provocation looked stupid, but oddly enough, it was exactly what worked. Now the aggressive swordsman was here, all for the opportunity to finally kill his hated rival. Instead of wasting energy on a fight, Alex suggested calming down a bit. He had long noticed that Leo carried a sword that was not worthy of him. A random drop on this floor contains an item that can complement any blade in the world. The fire attribute will become a full-fledged enhancement, and will take Stalker to a whole new level. If he wants to get this item, he will have to join the team and clear the 4th floor. And only then will they be able to fight, and the agreement will be fulfilled. These conditions were too difficult to refuse, and from that moment on the team was fully formed. Now, it was time to start defending the base, and a clear and well-thought-out strategy was essential. Leonardo's appearance slightly unsettled the others, as he immediately spoiled the atmosphere in the group. However, Alex asked everyone not to be nervous and to focus on the common goal. Before going out to the stadium, Jessica gave him the very items that Christopher had promised. The twin dragon swords gained magical power after the Tower of Trials appeared. Now, even just holding these blades in your hands noticeably increased your mana level. Grandfather must have shed many tears when parting with such an artifact. Now the dragon's twin swords must help his granddaughter and her friends achieve the impossible. But first, I had to meet people who no one had invited here. Judging by their weapons, it was immediately clear that these guys had come down from the upper floors. Alex looked closer and recognized the representative of the Murim Guild from the 21st floor. The guy immediately introduced himself and said his name. Daniel. Alex made it clear that he wasn't interested, and that the Namgung family weren't allies, but a walking problem with swords and delusions of grandeur. The insult was thrown straight in his face, like a challenge to a duel without any unnecessary greetings. The Namgung family was known for its elite warriors and inflated egos, much like Donald Trump's. Such people do not tolerate neglect, quickly lose their temper, and explode with anger, like gel balloons. Alex had long since studied their behavior, and now he didn't even want to look at Daniel. His words made him literally glow with rage, and the situation began to rapidly escalate. There were other Murim residents hiding in the Chinese guild, and if you find them all, you can get one of the sword skills. It looks like this guild is working on 2 fronts at once, and its actions will now have to be closely monitored. These warriors hid their true identities, pretending to be ordinary players. Alex had already deliberately provoked the conflict, so no one was going to back down or make excuses. All members of his team are used to acting as the first number, because in this world, only the one who goes on the attack wins. For the first time, viewers saw Mark working against the crowd, not with a blade, but by summoning mechanisms, turning the battlefield into a living death factory. As for Jessica, her no-step-back technique finally showed itself in all its glory. No concessions, no retreats, and no mercy. Teresa also activated her armor and assumed a fighting stance, immediately making it clear that she intended to survive this fight, not wait it out. The Phantom needed an extra 3 minutes, and he directly asked Leonardo to help him buy this time. It was necessary to drag out the moment a little, although Stalker assured that there was no need for this and that he himself would clear the entire perimeter. Compared to the monsters, the humans moved jerkily, made mistakes, and panicked. For the Phantom, this was not a battle but a cold clearing of the road. Niram's forces always had aces up their sleeves, right down to missile warheads. It was necessary to seriously strain to repel such attacks, and at the same time not forget to knock out still living opponents. Stalker quickly attracted attention with his aggressive swordplay, fearlessness, and constant pressure. At some point, Daniel became truly interested in him, and a duel was announced between the two high-level swordsmen. Namgung activated the Imperial Sword, a technique available only to a select few. It was said that this skill was passed down from generation to generation, only to the most talented members of the family. No one left a legacy to Stalker. He went from novice to professional on his own. He had no clan, no secret techniques, no lineage, just a worn-out sword and a habit of not retreating when others had already given up. The battle with Daniel turned out to be difficult, and at some point the friends noticed it. Teresa came to the rescue in time, offering a shield at a critical moment. Alex also didn't waste a second, activated the fire element and smiled predatorily, looking at his opponent. Everything around burst into flames and the cold atmosphere instantly turned into a real hell. Daniel is used to fighting in close combat, relying on martial arts techniques. Finding himself in an environment where magic played a key role, he quickly felt uncomfortable. Daniel spun around trying to figure out what was going on. It looked like Biden had been given a new briefing without prompting and asked to remember why he had come here in the first place. Alex instantly changed tactics and instead of fiery pressure, offered his opponent Arctic cold. This was enough to immobilize the swordsman and deliver a crushing blow. No matter how hard Daniel was trying to win, today he faced an opponent of a different scale, one his family had never even set foot on before. He was ready to die until a cross-stroke erupted in the sky. The Phantom's strongest attack was destroyed, and Daniel only survived thanks to a stroke of luck. Today he was lucky. His family was nearby and managed to intervene. All the Triad residents finally showed themselves, and now Alex got the opportunity to copy their skill. He chose Endless Step and combined the technique with Shadow Graveyard. The system announced the creation of the Demon King's Steps. Simply put, Alex became noticeably faster, although this did not make him elusive. Namgung's family laughed at Daniel. This guy screwed up again. He always took on too much and then called for help to avoid losing his head. His older brother, Thomas Namgung, gave him a harsh reprimand along with Katie and Donald. They warned him not to get involved with ordinary people. In a fit of anger, Daniel revealed that the Phantom already knew about their origin from the tower. Surprised glances turned to Alex. The Namgung family was confident that they had integrated perfectly into the Chinese guild. The battle could continue, and an enraged Daniel insisted on it. But the first wave of monsters was already approaching, and it would be foolish to waste energy instead of taking the base. Alex made it clear that the stadium belongs to his team, and he does not intend to share it with anyone. The swordsman family pretended that their base was much better, and that they would calmly go there. Their large team should have been ready, although after the fight everyone was depressed and confused. They chose the supermarket in advance, relying on strong walls and food supplies. It was an excellent place for a long defense, although not without its drawbacks. A couple of minutes later, the first zombies appeared, filled with rage and a thirst for murder. The team began to get nervous. There were only 5 of them, and the army of monsters seemed endless. Alex reassured his friends and reminded them that the flowers of the sun are much more useful than they look. He gathered everyone around him and laid out the plan. The main goal of the defense is to prevent the flag in the center of the stadium from being captured. There were 4 entrances to the arena, and a plant had already been planted near each one. The plants needed to be preserved. They were the ones that provided protection for the entire base. The stadium's size allowed for a reward for the maximum number of kills. Flowers were supposed to destroy the bulk of the monsters, and during moments of respite, players were required to hold back the onslaught. Mark remained in the center, covering his allies and monitoring directions with drones. Jessica took the north. Teresa went south. Everyone took their position and was ready to fight to the end, no matter the cost. It was the perfect moment to use the dragon's twin swords. When the monsters showed up, the team was already prepared and looked convincing. The enraged zombies rushed forward, as if they had sensed a delicious meal in advance. The flowers of the sun instantly activated fiery flashes and greeted the guests according to all the rules. The scorched zombies screamed even louder, the screeching reminiscent of a massacre. The stadium, accustomed to thousands of spectators, turned into a devilish coliseum. The humans didn't even have to engage in combat right away. One wave of fire was enough to destroy the zombie squad. Then reinforcements arrived and it became clear. Now it was the players' turn. Alex spoke calmly and clearly while everyone around him was nervous. A rare skill in a world where people get confused after 3 notifications in a row. He looked at Teresa one last time, and a spark seemed to fly between them. In moments of danger, he was always there, and the holy angel of Amsterdam had no doubt that together they would cope. Pushed away by warm memories, she returned to reality and turned into a furious paladin. For the next half hour, the stadium was awash in blood, and the kill counter grew so quickly that even the system couldn't keep up with the update. The first wave of monsters ended, and the players had 3 hours of respite. Among the unknown rankers from all over the world, a guy named Ken stood out, who had recently lost his hair. He knew perfectly well that the city was riddled with cameras and every second was broadcast live. Ken looked at the online numbers as if likes were about to replace his talent, an old illusion that had never saved anyone. At first, he fell into depression due to the loss of his appearance, but over time he managed to pull himself together. After the first wave ended, many looked depressed and noticeably tired. Alex was prepared for this. He handed out power-up pills to everyone and quickly relieved the general tension. Phantom didn't waste a minute, working on new plants and doing everything to ensure the base was ready for the next battle. Before the new wave, he acted like a child, while others looked at him with bewilderment and called him a pervert. Leonard couldn't watch it, knowing he was losing to a guy who talked to plants. Having finished his preparations, Alex decided to take a little walk. He understood perfectly well that everyone was now busy preparing supplies for the battlefield. Nobody paid any attention to it or realized that it didn't matter at all. Alex walked into an ordinary house that no one even considered as a base. It was nice to return to where he had once been as a very young teenager, not understanding his goals. It was here that the magic mirror was located, allowing one to move through space. The second version of this mirror was located in a supermarket on the next street. Alex appeared without warning. Now all he had to do was disappear into the crowd. Meanwhile, the Namgung family members still couldn't forget the fight with that guy. Daniel swore to kill him with his own hands for all the humiliations he had to endure. The sister advised him to calm down, reminding him that there was no point in dwelling on people who hadn't even climbed to the 10th floor. But the older brother thought seriously. He had already met quite a few ordinary players, but none of them revealed his true identity, unlike the Phantom. Suddenly there was an explosion and the ground shook underfoot. Something happened in the warehouse and a response was needed immediately. Horrible plants appeared out of nowhere, devouring everything in their path. Alex brought a few gifts to keep the competitor's base from relaxing. He didn't even hide his face and openly admitted that it was his work. He wasn't just mocking the family of swordsmen. He was making it clear that the secrets of this floor could not be hidden. Alex knew about the queen and had no doubt that he would finish her off personally. If the base, defended by more than 200 people, is destroyed before the third wave, the owner of the 4th floor will appear. She was called the Womb of the Dead, Queen Victoria. It seemed as if the Phantom was deliberately doing everything to summon this mad queen and dance a slow tango with her. He was too lazy to clear out zombies hundreds of times, so he decided to speed up the process. After finishing the conversation, he disappeared, and the supermarket base was destroyed by the spawn of hell. The roar of destruction was heard by everyone. The moment was even broadcast online. Once the conditions were met, the unique quest began immediately. Queen Victoria woke up from a long sleep and decided to wipe people off the face of the city. When the quest started, everyone tensed up, from anger and a complete lack of understanding of what was happening. By that time, the captain had returned from the supermarket as if nothing had happened and activated the solar eclipse stone. The artifact plunged the world into darkness, blocking out the sun and weakening light abilities. At the same time, the shadow abilities became stronger, and this is exactly what Alex was looking for. The monsters felt a surge of strength, while Teresa suddenly weakened. Her light techniques relied on the sun, and even in the dungeons she never fought at full strength. Victoria felt the strength surge through her body and laughed a hoarse old man's laugh, the laugh of someone who had long since outlived his own death. She immediately began to look for the one who eclipsed the sun, and very quickly found her target. All the monsters rushed towards the stadium, the perfect moment to upload a video. The online chat instantly turned into a dumping ground for theories, from a brilliant plan to the end of the world. Some claimed that Alex had gone crazy. Others were sure it was part of a strategy. Friends hoped that he would fix everything, although they increasingly called him an idiot from whom it was better to stay away. Phantom had a plan, and that was what was most infuriating. In a world of screams, he just silently did his job. Alex looked at the team and said that their role today was decisive. Much depended especially on Stalker. The fate of the mission depended on his actions. The Queen and her retinue were already slowly approaching the stadium. She always considered people weak and unprepared for a real war. Her favorite weapons were long claws and a poisonous tongue. When the monsters approached the stadium, everything around them burst into flames and exploded. The fire destroyed most of the creatures, and even Victoria became nervous for a moment. Then she saw a giant blue glacier, mesmerizing with its aura. Inside the ice were frozen players defending the base from invasion. A small purple crystal flickered next to them, impossible to ignore. Alex had to pay his friends dearly to persuade them to act as bait. Leonard looked especially unhappy. He was used to being the center of attention. The key to the trap was precisely in the crystal that Victoria was now holding. This stone activated the ice prison, trapping the Queen and her retinue. One flash was enough to freeze everyone. Having experienced the hellish cold, Victoria broke the icy shackles and ordered the players to leave her domain. She planned to take over the stadium and make it her base, but plans rarely go perfectly. The bait's job was simple: to hold her attention. As soon as the Queen focused only on them, Alex activated the acceleration technique. He rushed towards the royal fortress, knowing that it was almost unguarded. Victoria felt a void behind her, and for the first time in a long time she realized that she was not being attacked, she was being used.